Hello, it is 7 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of January. Welcome to Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Now, this is the show where we take a look at the good and the bad bits of the news and dissect them with our panel for your entertainment. And later on, we'll get a culture fix with Ellie Phillips, who'll be reviewing the latest releases in the world of television. But first, the headlines. Israel must do all it can to prevent genocide in Gaza, but the International Criminal Court stops short of ordering a ceasefire. The King is said to be doing well after receiving hospital treatment for an enlarged prostate. Leaving Liverpool at the top of his game, Jurgen Klopp surprises the world of football with his bombshell decision. Now, coming up, I'll be joined by our panel, Dan Snow and Katie Puckrik, who are here with us until 9 o'clock, and we'll get their take on the week's news. Including this, with multiple conflicts around the world, are we really considering conscription in the UK? And what happened when Tom Holland's bonus for his Marvel films was sent to Tom Hollander by mistake? It's great to have your company. We're here with you for the next 3 hours, so stay a while. It's Friday night. Good evening and thank you for being with us. The International Court of Justice has demanded that Israel do all it can to prevent acts of genocide in its war against Hamas in Gaza, but has stopped short of ordering a ceasefire. Judges in The Hague are considering a case brought by South Africa which alleges Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. Now, Israel had hoped to get the case thrown out, but the court decided it will go ahead, although it could take years before there's a final ruling.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again.
Well, that was the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacting to that ruling from the courts. The Foreign Minister of the Palestinian Authority, though, welcomed the court's ruling.
The ICJ judges assessed the facts and the law. They ruled in favor of humanity and international law. We call in all states to ensure that all provisional measures ordered by the court are implemented, including by Israel, the occupying power. This is a binding legal obligation. States now have clear legal obligations to stop Israel's genocidal war on the Palestinian people in Gaza and to make sure that they are not complicit. The ICJ order is an important reminder that no state is above the law.
The thoughts now of our International Affairs Editor, Dominic Waghorn, who was in The Hague today for us. Dom, it's great to have you with us. So just give us a sense of what it was like in court when that ruling was read out. And what impact do you think this will have, if any, on the ongoing fighting?
Well, there was a real sense of, I think, momentous anticipation, a sense that history was about to be made, because Israel, of course, has never been in a situation like this, a country that was founded partly to be a refuge against the possibility of any further genocides in the wake of the worst genocide in history, the Holocaust, but itself was effectively in the dock and waiting for this ruling from the judges in the International Court of Justice. Their delegation of lawyers and barristers sat there looking nervous and pretty serious and I think looked rather concerned before the judges walked in. The South Africans looked much more relaxed, smiling away for the cameras, and then the judges walked in, I think deliberately slowly to, I think, underline the sort of sombre nature of the charges. Genocide is the crime of all crimes, that really the most heinous charge that could be brought against a nation or an individual. And so it was a great burden and real responsibility for the judges to have considered this and then to come out with their provisional ruling. In terms of what they announced in that ruling, they spoke for their president spoke for about 40 minutes. It could have been worse for Israel in the sense they could have ordered a ceasefire, and Israel, I think in that sense, might have then just said, well, we're damned whatever we do, and refused to comply with the outcome of the ruling. Instead, the judges stopped short of saying they believe genocide is being committed by Israel. That would have been very surprising at this stage, because this was just a provisional ruling in a trial or a process that could take years. But what they said is they're so worried about the possibility that genocide could be being conducted. That very possibility, just the possibility, made them issue a number of demands and orders against the Israelis. The Israelis have to take action to prevent any possibility that genocide is being conducted. They need to prevent and punish genocidal incitement, potentially by senior Israeli officials. And the judges spent some time reading out a number of quotes from senior Israeli government ministers that seem to make them worried about the possibility of genocidal incitement. And I think they were most worried about the possibility or the clearly unfolding humanitarian disaster, which they said is verging on catastrophic in Gaza, and they want the Israelis to do a lot more to deal with that. So I think that all of that is undoubtedly a stain on Israel's record, and the concern I think for them is twofold beyond that. Their allies will have to think twice now about their attitude to Israel, which is now being branded a potentially genocidal government, or certainly a government or a state that is being investigated now under allegations and charges of genocide. What does it mean for Britain, for America and their support of Israel? We've heard from the Palestinians there, and also from their Deputy Justice Minister, who was at the court, saying that now Britain has to think very hard about supporting Israel in a military sense, but also diplomatically and politically as well. But the other big concern for Israel, of course, is that now for years to come, they're going to be investigated by the International Court of Justice, because it takes a long time for the judges to reach a final ruling, and throughout those years they're going to be branded with this allegation and being investigated for the charge of genocide. It's not an outcome they would have wanted. They wanted the case to be thrown out completely. Instead, now they do face years of being investigated before they have a chance of expunging that stain on their record.
OK. Dominic, for now in The Hague, thank you for that. Now, back here, the King is said to be doing well after being admitted to hospital for prostate treatment. His Majesty entered the London clinic this morning with the Queen by his side. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, reports.
It was a low-key departure as the King, with the Queen at his side, left home for hospital. He's now an inpatient at the London clinic, here for a procedure to treat his prostate condition. In a statement, a palace spokesperson confirming the King was this morning admitted to a London hospital for scheduled treatment. His Majesty would like to thank all those who've sent their good wishes over the past week, and is delighted to learn that his diagnosis is having a positive impact on public health awareness. And that's clear from clicks on prostate websites, rapidly rising since the King shared his news.
We've seen about a 60% uptick in people coming through on our inquiry lines. The interesting thing is that the men who are coming through are being more open in the way they converse with us. They, instead of being a little bit reserved, as has been seen in the past, I think the King's lead has led people to want to talk about the subject.
And outside the palace, no King, but plenty of support.
I think it's nice, and if it helps people in the public to relate to the King better, it's a good thing.
So I think it's great that he's so open about it. If it leads other people to go and get checked, then that can only be a good thing.
He's cancelled engagements, but released a photo taken this week for Holocaust Memorial Day. No word, though, on when he'll return to work.
The fact that the King has not appointed councillors of state suggests that he'll be away from his duties only for a short period, and that when he sort of comes back, he'll probably focus on sort of the desk job, which is going through those red boxes.
A few hours after the King's admission, the Queen left hospital.
We now have this extraordinary situation with both the King and Kate being treated in the same hospital at the same time. The King even visiting his daughter-in-law just before his surgery.
Kate is still recovering after her abdominal surgery. This, we're told, will take 2 to 3 months. As for the King, he's said to be doing well. But for now, both senior royals out of action. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Central London.
Now, a father who is accused of the manslaughter of his newborn baby girl by gross negligence has defended how his daughter was treated.
Nearest rest stop. The nearest rest stop. Yeah, rest stop.
Well, the jury was today shown video of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon's car after it caught fire on a motorway as they travelled with their daughter in January of last year. They're both facing charges including child cruelty and causing or allowing the death of a baby girl. A court in Moscow has extended the pre-trial detention of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich until the end of March. Russian authorities say that the hearing took place behind closed doors because the case is classified. Gershkovich and his employer, the Wall Street Journal, deny spying charges, and the US government say he is being wrongfully detained. The Culture Secretary has launched a second investigation into a potential foreign takeover of the Telegraph. The new Ofcom and Competition Markets Authority investigation will push back the deadline for a deal by weeks. Lucy Fraser pointed to public concern about the takeover by an Abu Dhabi-backed entity.
It's really hard to say goodbye to you.
I would say thank you.
Ingenuity, thank you for bringing us all together.
Thank you for leading the charge in our adventure on Mars, and we will never forget you.
Which has been grounded for good because of a damaged rotor blade. Ingenuity became the first powered aircraft to fly on another planet when it arrived on Mars with the Perseverance rover back in 2021. Its mission was meant to last just 30 days, but it's gone on for nearly 3 years. Now, there was some entirely unexpected huge news out of Anfield today. Jurgen Klopp has announced that he's about to leave Liverpool, well, at the end of the season. The 56-year-old says he needs to step away. Now, in the 9 years that he was in charge, he transformed the club into one of the best sides in the world. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
When you've won it all, when can you give all this up? When, for Jurgen Klopp, you're just exhausted. This 9th season at Liverpool will be his last.
It is that I'm... how can I say that? I'm running out of energy. I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again and again.
The exit plan was revealed to the owners in November, but kept secret until Friday morning's sudden announcement by the 56-year-old.
Shocked, gutted to be honest. Still taking it all in, but didn't see it coming at all.
I couldn't stop crying, like it was hard to not cry. And I just wanted to stay.
He's been here a long time, maybe it's time to change.
Klopp arrived from Germany in 2015 with energy and eccentricity, transforming the Reds with heavy metal football. Taking them back to the summit of Europe in 2019, before bringing the elusive prize to Anfield in 2020. Premier League glory at last, a team built around Salah, Van Dijk and Alisson, ending Liverpool's agonising 30-year title drought. There's complete shock here at Anfield as they imagine life without Jurgen Klopp next season. He's formed such a close bond with the fans, but more importantly, he's turned Liverpool into a dominant force once again.
When you think about legendary managers of the past, your Fergusons, your Wengers, it's that part after them that's always the hardest to do. What kind of state did they leave the team in? And I think Jurgen was always really keen to make sure the team could be successful without him once he's gone. And it looks like that's the case.
Jurgen Klopp will leave as few managers do, on his own terms. And he could still leave with another 4 trophies, making following this iconic manager even harder. Rob Harris, Sky News, Anfield.
All right, it's time to introduce our panel for this evening, for the next couple of hours at least. The historian and broadcaster Dan Snow and the artist and radio presenter Katie Puckrik. It's great to have you both here. Huge fans of both your work. You don't have to say it back. I know you already are. Absolutely. Kloppy, I was very surprised when that news broke today.
I was very surprised, and I've got a son that's a Liverpool fan. Unfortunately, the in-laws are all from the northwest, so they are all. But and it's he has been like he's been taken on, hasn't he? He's a by like the Polians and the fans, like it's as if he's a local. It's extraordinary, and And, you know, that 30-year drought, I mean, we all thought Liverpool had the curse, didn't we? And then...
We did. It's something about him as well, that he's really taken on the whole mentality, not only of the club, but of the city as well, which I think this is why they took him on so well.
I mean, I wonder who gets more credit? Do the players get the credit somewhat, or does the manager get the credit?
The thing is with someone like Jurgen Klopp, speaking out of turn, he has a football philosophy, so oftentimes with someone like that, he really leads the club in a certain direction. He makes them play that rock and roll style of football, which is high press. So someone like him has a huge impact on the players.
And I love that they call him eccentric as well. Like, you need that little, sense of being off that gets people on your side.
Yeah, he does have a certain way about him, and he will be sadly missed. And I guess the thing, as was discussed in that package, is how they're going to replace him, because that's always the hardest part, trying to find someone to fill those shoes.
They need a new dad or mom.
Absolutely. Oh, well, good point. I think that happened not just yet, but they could. All right, guys, plenty more from you coming up very soon. We'll be getting stuck into reviewing more of the week's news with Dan and Katie. This is Friday Night on Sky News. And coming up, is conscription the only way Britain can cope with the rising threats of war with Russia?
If you take sugar, stick a bit of that in.
And why Britain's top diplomat and members of the Royal Navy have waded into an international dispute over how to make a decent cup of tea.
They locked me up for 3.5 years and were prepared to throw away the key. And within a couple of seconds, there were a number of armed security.
An autism patient's dramatic escape from a secure psychiatric care unit sparks a major investigation.
I was petrified.
Follow Patient 11 wherever you get your podcasts.
And now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news. Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with her, aren't they?
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello there and welcome back to Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Now, first up, we're going to look at whether we need the return of national service or even conscription. This week, the head of the British Army suggested that the general public would need to sign up if the UK entered a large-scale war. General Sir Patrick says we would need a citizen army because the military is just too small.
The head of the British Army has warned that members of the British public may have to be called up to serve if the UK ever goes to war.
What he's really saying is that unless we're prepared to make the army bigger, we will fall back on having to go back to conscription.
What's coming over the horizon should shock us, it should worry us, and we are not prepared.
Retention of critical armed forces personnel.
Our forces are not at the readiness they should be at. There's no doubt about it.
Iran-backed Houthi pirate thugs.
Russia, North Korea. The United Kingdom will not hesitate to respond again in self-defence.
All right, let's get the thoughts of Dan Snow and Katie Puckrik. And Katie, I mean, when you saw this news this week, what did you make of this idea that, conscription might come back?
My immediate reaction is that actions have consequences. So if there's a certain amount of apathy or ennui about what's going on in other countries and how the authoritarian rulers are sort of gathering steam, there's always going to be consequences. Wars will start. Okay, Ukraine is sort of safely far away, but there's other NATO countries involved, and at a certain point, Britain is going to be called to kind of step up. And when you see what's happened in Ukraine and in Russia, where people are kind of just frog marched into the front lines without any preparation, that is so grim. So obviously, it's horrifying, the idea of having to prepare for a war that you're not interested in and don't want to participate in, but it'd be far worse to not have any preparation at all.
To fall into or not be ready for it. I mean, Dan, give us a sense of the history of conscription. This generation now, we have no sort of collective memory of mass war, do we? So we probably have no idea of what that's actually like.
Yeah, we don't. But that's true of lots of other generations, true of the First World War generation. But we have virtually very, very limited periods of conscription in British history. Like a handful of years we've had conscription over the last couple of centuries. And we typically fought with a big, strong navy and a smaller army that's usually made up of professionals or imperial forces, bigger numbers of Indians, for example, which was also a volunteer army in the days of empire. But and every generation, I should say, because there's been a lot of discourse this week saying people that wouldn't know, these kids these days, they'd never fight. That is what every generation said about young people. And I was reading a book written in the 12th century this week by accident by called Geoffrey of Monmouth. And in this book, he is describing, well, we've been at peace for so long. He said 5 years. It shows how dark and violent the past was. We've been at peace for 5 years. People have forgotten how to fight. They're rubbish these days. And then he says, actually, when we started fighting, we all remembered quite quickly. And that is true of the First World War. It's true of the Second World War. It's true of Iraq and Afghanistan. When you do send these young people, these teenagers, because that's what they are, into battle, they perform magnificently if they're well-led, well-equipped, which they are. And actually, in a way, it's sad. Humans, we're very malleable. We will do what we're told. We whine about it. But if there was conscription, of course, young people, sadly, tragically, they would go and fight and they'd be good at it.
I mean, the conscription thing is one thing, and that's perhaps what would happen if you had to, impress people into the army. But the national service thing is another part of this as well, which many countries do have national service. They have some time to spend in the army, a couple of years, and that kind of keeps a standing army of a certain number, right?
There's something interesting about this idea of national service because I don't want to make it sound like a fun weekend camp away with the Boy Scouts, but it is a way for different, diverse populations to encounter each other, to get to know each other, and make a cohesive society, just on a micro level. And I don't think that's altogether a bad thing to instill a sense of community.
I think it's really good for that. What I don't think it's that good for is building a very useful
Getting a good army. Yeah.
Because you spend all of your time, rather than mastering armoured warfare, like chasing slightly reluctant 17-year-olds around, teaching them how to put their boots on and stuff. But I think it's great for all the reasons. And that's why some nations say, well, with perhaps NHS and ambulance drive, whatever, there may be other ways of doing civil national service as well.
Yeah, maybe work in the forestry service or some other things like that. I was thinking about the Peace Corps as well when I heard this the other night. The Peace Corps, that was like a sort of a chance to kind of do something that was good for the country, right? This was during the 70s and 80s. I mean...
Yeah, and there are charities that my wife's involved in, for example, like a year here. So you take a year off after high school if you're lucky, if you're privileged enough to be able to do so. But maybe you go and teach in a school in the UK, or you even work in the prison. So there are options like that. But I do think what was lacking this week for me, which is extraordinary, is a discussion of the deranged Orange Nero over in America, because this is what the
we're coming on to. We're coming on to.
That's why we're talking about our armed forces. Suddenly, all the Brits like, oh my goodness, we're going to do this without the Americans, which is unimaginable for any military planner in the last 80 years.
Yeah,
like, inconceivable. It cannot happen. So suddenly we're like, oh my goodness, and of course, the obvious alternative, the only alternative, is not doing it ourselves. It's doing it in coalition with our allies in Europe, right? So we need to have a very real conversation about that.
And is that conversation happening? Just finally, with the European allies, I mean, is there a sense that they are going to be stepping up?
They've got no choice, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, we're kind of over in the UK, sort of furthest away from the action. But yeah, over in Sweden, they've got the national service starting up again because they're about to join NATO, and they're feeling, the pinch.
Putin was in Kaliningrad just the other day between Lithuania and Estonia, I think it is. Is that right? And that was a direct threat to those two nations. There, it's a concerning time.
We are treaty bound to protect the Estonian border. And
this is the point, isn't it? Will we be willing to go and fight for those little Baltic states because of a treaty?
And that's the thing, that's the piece of paper, right? That's why we went to war in 1914 for a little state, which people had never been to, Belgium, and we went to war for a piece of paper then, and will we go forward? And that is exactly why Vladimir Putin, if Donald Trump wins the next election, he has said he will not do that. He will not go to war against Putin in the Baltic states. That is exactly why Putin will probably test the wire, like a velociraptor testing the wire. And new Prime Minister Keir Starmer is going to be on point, and I hope he's ready.
Jurassic Park reference as well.
I hope he's drinking his protein shakes, because he's going to be making some big decisions early next year.
You've given him the advice that he needs, Dan. I'm sure he's watching. He's a big fan of this show. All right, let's have a quick chat then about, from National Service, the first thing that many people might need in basic training is how to make a cup of tea. This week, Karen Pierce, the British ambassador to the US, was so concerned about a series of so-called tips by Americans about making tea, which included adding salt to your brew, that she asked the British military, of all things, to step in. Let's take a look at this.
How to make a real cup of tea. Here are my military advisors.
You don't need a microwave to make a cup of tea.
First, you add your tea bag. If you take sugar, stick a bit of that in.
Making tea at altitude is complex, as water boils at quite a different temperatures. Chin-chin.
All right, I mean, I can see you're raring to get in an American and a Brit.
There we go.
Any different... How do you make... You've been here for ages. You make your tea like a...
All right, number one, who cares about tea?
Oh my goodness.
Well, I was going to say I'm a coffee drinker, so...
Shots fired.
And also... In America, we're all about the coffee, but actually it's only recently that Americans have cared about nice coffee, because all the nice coffee comes from Australia. They know how to make a decent flat white. So Americans don't have a leg to stand on. I'm interested in this salt business because...
I tried to read the science behind it.
There's a chemistry experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. But the thing is that you Brits have this need to cling on to these things to sort of bolster your sense of superiority.
Give us something here. Sense of superiority? No, just sense of anything. We're just clinging on here.
Is that why they do it?
But this is the thing that no one picked up on. I'm the history geek. It was the 250th anniversary this week of the news of the Boston Tea Party arriving in the UK, and the American embassy were putting out these statements saying, was that deliberate? That had to.
Of course it was.
It's a subtweet.
It was the ultimate troll.
Yeah, it's the ultimate troll.
We all fell for it.
We all fell for it. We walked straight into their trap.
Milk first or...
I'm actually not a tea drinker.
No one on the panel's a real tea drinker. All right, don't put your milk in first.
You're fired.
Yeah, exactly. I'm terrible. Love tea. All right, Dan, Katie, lovely stuff. Plenty more from you as we get stuck into the review of the week after this short break. Well, this is Friday night on Sky News. Coming up, Donald Trump is, of course, the runaway favourite to take on Biden in the presidential election come November. But is he as likely to make it into the White House? And the King continues to be open about his health as he receives treatment for his prostate. Hello there and welcome back to Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Now, is there anything that's going to stop Donald Trump from winning a second term in the White House? This week, he cruised to a second consecutive victory in the New Hampshire Republican primaries after winning the Iowa caucuses. Now, no Republican candidate has won the first two states and then not gone on to secure the presidential nomination. Well, let's hear a little bit from former President Trump now about what he'll do if he were to get back into the White House.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled, so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies.
And there are 10 things like that. One of them is actually to bring in a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, if you can imagine, a man who's facing 91 federal charges. I mean, he's laying out there exactly what he's going to do to basically try and hollow out America.
No mystery. Going after the civil servants is a non-partisan position. And his idea is that he's just going to stack the decks with loyalists. And he's putting it out there. He's laying his plan clean and pure.
And making it very, very clear, because I think part of the argument was the first term was chaotic because they didn't really know what they were doing. He's had a bit of time now and got some people in to work out exactly how to do it properly.
Yeah, and actually the first term they weren't expecting to win. It was chaotic, as you say. We were saved from fascism, I think, partly by his own incompetence and laziness. He didn't actually really want to do the work. And if you remember, his first cabinet appointments were mainstream Republicans. Mm-hmm. And by the end, you saw that justice secretaries, for example, were switching in the last few months of the Trump term. It was very much lackeys and family members virtually. Mm. And this time he'll go. He knows where all the levers are to pull this time, right? So he's going to go in there hard and fast, and it's going to be a completely different paradigm compared to the first time around, which was bad enough. And it's climate. It's a massive problem on climate. It's a huge challenge for democracy. And then also international security is we're going to be presented with unimaginable, completely different world. So it's people thought the first term was pretty wild. The second term would be a whole different level.
But of course, it's not a fait accompli, is it? He's still going to beat Biden in the general, or he's still going to get the nomination first. I mean, Nikki Haley could surprise us.
You know, it's interesting because 70% of Americans have indicated that they're so bored, they're so fatigued with the idea of a matchup between Biden and Trump. It's just Groundhog Day. And the thing that's bad about that is that possibly people would be so filled with ennui to not even vote. But the good thing about Trump, if there is one good thing, is that he is so polarizing that not only does he drive people to the polls to vote for him, he drives people to the polls to vote against him.
Absolutely right. And that's, I guess, what the Biden campaign are going to be holding on to, that they can actually get enough people out to say, look, we might not like you, Mr. Biden, but we can't have this guy.
Yeah, I think so. That's the argument, isn't it? But the crazy thing about the electoral college system in America, obviously, it's not one person, one vote in America. Each state is divided into as if it was like a constituency here in the UK, and that means actually, although Biden won by millions and millions of votes last time, the overall vote total, he won by less. I mean, sort of. Tens of thousands of votes across 3 key states. So really, it's a coin toss. I mean, it's about convincing those same people to kind of turn up as last time. And very few people switching could lead to a different result.
Yeah, those 6 states are all super close even now. So we'll come down to those ones again as it did last time. All right, get you done. Thank you very much. Now, the King has continued to be quite open about his own health today as he went into hospital for treatment for an enlarged prostate. He was visited this afternoon by the Queen, having undergone surgery. Buckingham Palace announced last week the King needed treatment for an enlarged prostate, sharing the news to raise awareness of the condition, which is common in men over the age of 50. All right, Dan and Katie, now I was actually on air when this news broke last week. Of course, we heard the news about the Princess of Wales first, that she had abdominal issues and she was going to be in hospital for a while. Then the news of the King. And I was just kind of struck about the fact that we were having all these details about the health concerns of the monarchy.
Well, And quite rightly, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I have my prostate checked. I'm
Good.
45 now. I'm getting to that zone. And that makes me feel very good after it happens each year, because it's nice to know. I mean, it's a killer for men. And we're so bad at going to the hospital and going to doctors and checkups and stuff. So it's really important that anyone watching who's in that age group does exactly what the King did and get involved.
Got to go and get that thing checked. And it's that sort of, I guess, the public awareness campaign that they're trying to run, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good role model, right? Because he's, you know, he could hide his embarrassing little private complaints, but he doesn't. And he's, you know, he's got to be useful for something, so he might as well do that.
Useful for things. All right, Katie, Dan, let's move it on to something else that happened this week. And it's the COVID inquiry in Scotland, and it was quite the scenes when you saw the text messages that were being read out. The bleep button had to come into full use during some of the evidence sessions. There was foul language, missing messages, and talk of picking a fight, or rammy, as they say in Scotland, with the Westminster government. Here's some of the evidence we heard about messages between the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, and her closest advisor, Liz Lloyd.
On the 31st of October 2020 at 6:30 p.m, Prime Minister Boris Johnson began his address announcing the second national lockdown. And I want to pick up the messages between yourself and Nicola Sturgeon, which start 10 minutes into the address. So if we read the first message on the 31st of October at 6:40, you say, hitting the 15 minutes between the rugby and strictly to lock the country up. Let us never do this like this. Nicola Sturgeon replies, their comms are behind awful. We're not perfect, but we don't get nearly enough credit for how much better than them we are. She then replies, this is excruciating. Their comms are awful. Then she goes on to say, his utter incompetence in every sense is now offending me on behalf of politicians everywhere. You reply saying, I have a separate WhatsApp with, and the name's redacted, and Davy, and we are offended on behalf of spads everywhere. Nicola Sturgeon says, he is a clown.
A little sweary, but I think everyone's WhatsApps can be a bit sweary at times.
Is that what everybody's hot and bothered about? The cussing?
The sweary, yeah.
Or are they just a little more concerned that that the Scottish government weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing?
I mean, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, right? The sweary is not that important. It's the fact that they're all now covering their backs. And these are just the messages we've got. She deleted her entire phone.
Yeah.
It's that if you elect nationalists, whether you elect Brexiteers in London or nationalists in Edinburgh, and they talk about what we're really interested in is education or fishing in the case that it's what they are interested in is breaking a union apart. And finally, political gravity has caught up with people who just go, oh yeah, of course. So the evidence that is shocking that emotionless is that of course they saw COVID as an opportunity to show that they were going to be better, the distance south of Westminster, show that they were better with comms than Westminster, accentuate differences on this island when we were all affected by this disease that didn't respect national boundaries.
The politics of it was fascinating, though, because at the time, if we can remember back to all of that was going on, when she was giving her press conference, Nicola Sturgeon, she felt often like the most sensible person on the island giving the message to the people.
Yes, it's interesting because she was talking turkey then, and she's talking turkey now. I mean, the clown comment could be some value to that, but
but it's like your Ron DeSantis in America, right?
Yeah.
So he's in Florida. He's passing loads of laws in Florida that aren't about the people of Florida at all.
No.
They're all with an eye to him winning the White House, which he now hasn't done. No. So the people of Florida left all these like weird laws, dangerous laws around abortion, but laws around what you can teach in universities. They're all just like messaging laws for his presidential run. And that's what happens when you elect these people. And that is what, unfortunately, we've had in the UK on both sides of the Anglo-Scottish border. And the gravity's caught up with the SNP and gravity's caught up with Nicola Sturgeon.
You've been kind of delighted by that. Is that what you've been waiting for it to happen?
I hate borders. We need to join together with our neighbours, not obsess about splitting and distance.
Right on, Dan. Katie?
I don't like it.
All right, let's move on.
Katie think he'd like to get some distance.
Set a border up there between those two chairs. Final story for this section, and it's about kind of being paid by mistake. Now here, the star of White Lotus, Tom Hollander, was on NBC talking about the time that he was mistaken for the British actor Tom Holland.
I got an email from the agency saying, payment advice slip, your first box office bonus for The Avengers. And I thought... I don't think I'm in the Avengers. And it was an astonishing amount of money. And it was not his salary, it was his first box office bonus.
Well, Tom Holland, confused for Tom Hollander in email. I don't think the money actually went to his account. I think we can be certain of that. But, unfortunate mistake, especially to see how much someone else is getting paid.
Well, I just think this is such a great story because in a microcosm, it's this whole idea of the humiliation of being in show business. And I experience it on, big and small over the decades where, people want to quiz you on who they think you are. And if you tell them, oh, I'm Katie Puckrik, no, that's not, that's not who I think you are. Anyway, all these sort of things happen all the time. So, in fact, the fact that he is confronted with, this is your place in the hierarchy, and you'll never get to that place on the hierarchy. Yeah. I mean, that's harsh.
People think that us on telly are like egotistical, and the answer is we're the opposite of that. We might be mad, but we deal with a million petty acts of violence every day.
Yes.
Cab drivers go, "Are you Ben Fogle?" I go, "No, I'm not Ben Fogle."
I thought you were Ben Fogle.
Shut up. Or they sometimes, very rarely, say, "Oh, I've seen your programmes." I go, "What have you?" And they go, "Yeah, I can't remember what." So even when someone's seen your programme, they have no idea.
Isn't that the point of your ego? Your ego's being hurt by the fact they don't know.
But you're smashed all the time.
Yeah, you're being diminished all the time.
Yeah.
I have a funny story. A friend of mine who's a TV exec in LA, and her name is somewhat similar to Danny Glover. She's Tammy Glover, and she booked a nice hotel on a trip to Morocco, was very surprised when she got there and was shown to the penthouse suite, and then asked, when is Danny coming? And she said, he's not, but thank you. I'm enjoying this upgrade.
Very, very nice. Look, so we've got some other celebrities who have, I'm calling this name-alike. So we've got Holland and Hollander. Holland and Hollands, they're there. Then we've got Brian Cox and Brian Cox. Short story about this quickly. I was once sent up to Scotland to do a film with Brian Cox, and I said to my producer, why am I going to do a film with that scientist guy? Not realising it was the other Brian Cox in Dundee, and it was excellent. We've got Kate Moss and Kate Moss. There we go. Model and author. And then we've got the best one, Jon Snow and Jon Snow. Now, Jon Snow, there's a connection on our table here.
Yeah, he's not my dad, despite the millions of trolls.
So you're not Ben Fogle and he's not your dad. I am blown away.
This is a news channel. That's good news for everyone. So here's my dad's first cousin. He's my first cousin once removed.
You get to hang out at Christmases?
Yeah, we hang at Christmases and it's loud.
I can imagine. Well, I used to work at Channel 4, so I know what John is like. Right, yes, excellent. Very good stuff. Dan, Katie, thank you for that and for being with us so far. We're back with you after 8 o'clock when we'll continue to discuss the week's news. We're going to take a short break, but coming up in the sports, we're going to have more reaction to Jurgen Klopp's shock decision to stand down as manager of Liverpool at the end of the season.
We all live in an uncertain world.
From global conflict and crises to moments full of hope and unity. We'll take you to the heart of the story and help you understand the world around us. Join me, Yalda Hakim, on my new show, The World, on Sky News.
It's something, we've had them before in Northern Ireland, but they weren't kept, which is unfortunate. They were lost in the mists of time, 1750s, those sorts of dates. So to have one recovered properly, archaeologically, and then available for us to study. And as you say, the laboratory that I work with, 14 Chrono, did the dating and got this roughly 2,100 years. This is common for most bog bodies, peatland burials, because of the lack of oxygen down there and other chemical processes. So if you go to the Dublin Museum or Aarhus in Denmark, they're remarkable. You can see one of the fellows in Dublin has got a ginger beard, and you can see the fingerprints. And this one has elements of that, as well as being a bit decayed in others, as you can see on the photograph on your screen. So the police archaeologists were able to find fingernails, plenty of soft tissue, a kidney, which is really remarkable.
A kidney, that is quite incredible because that is soft tissue, isn't it? That we're not talking about bone and teeth here.
Sarah Jane, I hope everyone's had their supper because...
Sorry, I'm just checking the time, hopefully.
Yes. It is a bit weird, but it is nature.
Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Hello there and welcome back. You're watching Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Let's look at the sport. Teddy has joined us and there was a big story today, Teddy. Thanks for being with us.
No, good to be here. Thank you very much, yeah.
Huge news.
Yeah,
surprised.
Oh, it was a surprise, wasn't it? I think it was a huge surprise to Liverpool fans first and foremost. But Jurgen Klopp announcing around 10:30 on the Liverpool social media's accounts to begin with that he was leaving at the end of the season, which came as a massive surprise because over the past few days we've all been speculating about whether Liverpool could even win the quadruple off the back of beating Fulham at Craven Cottage or on aggregate beating them in the week of the League Cup final. The FA Cup this weekend. They're top of the Premier League by 5 points, ahead of big rivals Manchester City this time around. And they've got the Europa League. So it was a huge shock when it came out that he was going. And he's going to go at the end of the season. Been there for 8.5 years by that time, won the Champions League, won the Premier League, won the League Cup, the FA Cup. And above and beyond that, just a huge presence on the sporting landscape in this country.
It definitely is. Before we talk about sort of his legacy and stuff, just the timing of the announcement, saying it now, end of January, and then going to have the whole rest of the season where they are top of the league, as you say, 5 points clear. What kind of pressure is that going to put on the club, do you think, and the players?
He's a very emotionally astute manager. I think that's what will be the key, will be how he generates this. He says the players have responded well. He told them before the announcement today. You're right, because the precedent isn't great for Liverpool. They'll look back to 2002. I don't remember Sir Alex Ferguson announced, I'm going at the end of the season. He actually changed his mind. But that season, ultimately, Arsenal won the double and ended their run of winning the league titles. And you just wonder, with everything up for grabs for Liverpool, what effect it will have. We'll see on Sunday, Liverpool play Norwich in the FA Cup. And you just wonder what the atmosphere will be like there, because Noel Gallagher, former Oasis singer, of course, is actually a big Man City fan. He thinks there's going to be a period of mourning at Liverpool, but maybe the smart money will be on Klopp turning that emotion around, making it a celebration, saying, let's go again for 4 months, because he's saying, look, my energy isn't going to be there beyond the end of this season, but he says the positive of me saying this is that I know I've got enough energy to see us over the line. And he's an energetic manager. That's his calling card, isn't it? It's the charisma and the personality. So he's saying he's got enough, and maybe he will use that to galvanise the team to get firing and maybe win an unprecedented quadruple.
I mean, it's that heavy metal football, isn't it? And the thing is about what Klopp has done to that team and to football, maybe he's changed the way that the game is played, and it's going to be very difficult to replace him. Are there already any names being mentioned?
Yeah, it's funny to say about the replacing him. Jamie Carragher, and I've got a tweet here from him, former Liverpool star, of course, Sky Sports pundit, saying this news was always going to be a body blow to the club whenever it came. I just thought it'd be another few years. What a manager, what a man. Let's go out with a bang. Jurgen, former England's striker and captain Gary Lineker posting as well, saying, wow, huge news, what an incredible job he's done. In terms of speculation, the early running, and it may not have been a year or so ago that we'd have even thought about this, but Xabi Alonso, former Liverpool midfielder, won the Champions League with Liverpool, Real Madrid star as well. He's doing great things at Bayer Leverkusen at the moment. They're currently, 4 points clear of Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga, which is a huge achievement for him, but he's not got over the line yet. If you contrast it to Klopp, yes, he came from Bundesliga, but he'd actually won a couple of titles. He'd upset the great Bayern Munich at Borussia Dortmund. It's Xabi Alonso's, I think, second season. Saved them last season from relegation. Now they're building up. It was Real Sociedad B manager before that. Other names people might look at, Roberto De Zerbi at Brighton doing fantastic things. Unai Emery, former Arsenal manager, has really transformed Aston Villa. And it's a different team. And also what Unai Emery's done is kind of expose Steven Gerrard a little bit, who got sacked at Aston Villa with the team near the relegation zone. Emery's got them in the top 4. So there was a long plan of Gerrard was initially on the coaching staff, Liverpool legend at Liverpool, went to Rangers, won the title. At that point, they were saying he is the heir apparent to Klopp. But now he's struggled, got let go from Aston Villa. He's struggling actually in Saudi Arabia at Al Ettifaq. So that seems unlikely at this juncture. So it's a really huge decision because you're trying to replace the style, the gegenpress, the energy, the ability to oversee huge opponents. He's got a winning record against Pep Guardiola Klopp, which is incredible given that overall. Yeah. But you're also trying to then replace the manager of the coaching. You're probably not going to be able to tick all the boxes. So it feels like someone's going to come in and they'll probably go, presume, on the football side because the personality side is so unique and special.
And it is, and it's not just the team that he's made into sort of in his own moulding. It's this. He's brought into the city's brought into him as well, and that's going to be difficult for the city to have to deal with, to have to replace someone like Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, it's very touching. He said he's very happy to be an honorary Scouser and he understands the place. But even from the start, when he was appointed in October 2015, really shrewd and said, "I understand this place." He talked about the history of the industry of the city and what it meant to them, what the club meant to them, and trying to get that supremacy back, because remember, he'd led them to the title for the first time in 30 years. So this was a giant that was very much sleeping, and he's woken them up, and he understood the people and the club. So it's going to be a huge, huge hole to fill. And so, that's Jurgen Klopp. We've got a busy night coming up as well in the football and tennis news. Big story from the Australian Open.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Well, Stuart, it's been a few months now since the end of what was an incredible Ashes series. How are you adjusting now to life after playing cricket?
Yeah, really enjoying it. I think ultimately finishing on my own terms was really important for me, and I knew that I wanted to finish by my last ball playing for England. England versus Australia was a major pinnacle for me in Ashes cricket, and it was such a exciting and exhilarating series that I almost got to the stage where I don't know if it gets any better than this, really. So, yeah, it was great to be able to sort of make the decision on my own, finish on my own terms, and I don't think it will really properly hit me until the Test team play again, and Jimmy Anderson and Ben Stokes are walking out with an England cap on in their whites. I think that might sort of feel real, that I won't ever do that again. But no, at the moment I've got no regrets and feel really happy.
In the book you spoke about the fact that retirement only really came to you during the Old Trafford tests. So you came to a massive decision quite quickly.
Yeah, within 10 days, I think. So yeah, it was pretty stressful. Ultimately, anytime you walk away from something you love, it's really difficult. And I was loving playing cricket. I was loving working under Stokesy and Baz. It was great fun. I didn't feel much pressure. The communication was really good, and I was bowling really well and felt fit. So a lot of those things would say, carry on playing. And I honestly felt like I could do another couple of years, but I kept sort of bringing myself back to what's my next Everest, what's my next major challenge. I always need a challenge because I've got this goal to always continuously improve. I need something to charge towards and chase. And whenever I've written down in my whole career what's my next Everest, bang, within 30 seconds I've written down and I know what to target, and I just couldn't quite nail something down. So I think that ultimately told me that it was the right time to move and try something different.
The next Ashes 2 years away. Would that have felt too far when you were making that decision a few months ago?
No, I think I'd still be fit and fresh to play, but I know that a young family played a part as well. Annabella's turning 1. The travel's a lot in international cricket, and the young years are so valuable. Ultimately, I'm 37. Next Ashes be 39.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thank you for that, Teddy. Time now for a look.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, compared to the recent storms, our weather's looking much more settled, although wet and windy. Weather will affect the northwest. For most, it's a chilly evening under clear skies. However, it's going to be windier towards the north and west with blustery showers, and these may be wintry over the mountains in Scotland. Strong winds will feed in further showers to northwest Scotland overnight. Otherwise, much of the British Isles will be clear with dry spells. The winds are going to be lighter further south, allowing a frost and a few fog patches to form over parts of England. Saturday brings a mostly fine and dry day, albeit with some patchy drizzle on western hills. It's going to stay windy in the north and west, with further showers or longer spells of rain for northern Scotland and Western Ireland. A band of more persistent, heavy rain will sink south across the Northern Isles into northern Scotland with freshening winds. The north-west-south-east divide continues into Sunday with the possibility of very wet and very windy weather developing in the northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
All right, you're watching Friday Night, and coming up in the next hour of the programme, we'll have more from our panel, including talking about the ICJ ruling and calls for Israel to prevent genocidal acts in Gaza. Hello, it is 8 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of January. Welcome to Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Well, this is the show where we take all the good and bad bits of the news and dissect them for your entertainment. Now, our headlines tonight, we'll be speaking to our panel here in the studio, and later we're going to get our culture fix with Ellie Phillips. We'll be reviewing the latest releases in the world of film and television. But first, our headlines. Israel must do all it can to prevent genocide in Gaza, but the International Criminal Court has stopped short of ordering a full ceasefire. Sky News is on the front line with troops in Ukraine as plans to widen the draft of men forced to fight are being considered. The King is said to be doing well after receiving hospital treatment for an enlarged prostate. Leaving Liverpool at the top of his game, Jurgen Klopp surprises the world of football with his bombshell decision. Well, coming up, I'll be joined by our panel, Dan Snow and Katie Puckrik, who are here with us until 9 o'clock for their take on some of the week's news. Right, it's great to have your company. We're here for the next couple of hours, so stay with us. It's Friday night. Now, the International Court of Justice has demanded Israel do all it can to prevent acts of genocide in its war against Hamas in Gaza, but it has stopped short of ordering a full ceasefire. Judges in The Hague are considering a case that's been brought by South Africa, which alleges Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians. Israel had hoped to get the case thrown out, but the court decided it will go ahead, although it could take years before there is a final ruling. Here's our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
It was one of the most anticipated rulings in recent history. The South African accusers and the Israeli defence team waiting in suspense. In the UN's highest court, judges filed in to rule on the most heinous of charges, genocide. Israel, they say, does have a case to answer over its actions in Gaza.
In the court's view, the aforementioned facts and circumstances are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible.
There was no order for an immediate ceasefire as Israel had feared, but grave concern expressed for the humanitarian situation in Gaza and particular criticism for the statements of Israeli officials.
The court has taken note of a number of statements made by senior Israeli officials. Minister Gallant stated, speaking to Israeli troops on the Gaza border, I quote, "I have released all restraints. You saw what we are fighting against. We are fighting human animals."
Israel had urged the International Court of Justice to throw out this case. Instead, it will be fighting it for years to come. In this ruling, the judges don't take a position as to whether genocide is being committed by Israel in Gaza, but they are worried enough about the possibility to order Israel to do everything in its power to avoid doing so and to prevent and to punish genocidal incitement by senior Israeli officials. That in itself is a major blow to Israel, as is the fact that for years to come now, it is going to be investigated and tried for alleged genocide in the highest court in the United Nations. Israelis insist their campaign in Gaza is justified after the atrocities of October the 7th, the worst single loss of Jewish life since the genocide of the Holocaust. On the eve of International Holocaust Day, their Prime Minister reacted with anger to the ruling.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous.
Israel says South Africa's brought this action for political reasons because of close ties with the Palestinians. So what did South Africa's foreign minister make of the actions of Hamas, who the judges say must immediately release all hostages?
But has Hamas behaved genocidally, would you say, even outside of this court?
I believe that what has been done by Hamas is certainly caused great harm. And I do think that the hostages should be freed, and that's what we must focus on.
Most immediately, the ruling focuses world attention sharply on the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, demanding Israel act urgently to ease an unfolding catastrophe. But it puts pressure on all UN members to act too. Palestinian officials at the court say that Britain must now step back from supporting Israel.
Britain should stop sending weapons to Israel, should stop trying to cover up for the crimes that Israel is committing at the international level.
We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide!
The ruling doesn't bind Israel to any sweeping changes in the way it wages its war in Gaza. But its critics have prevailed now in efforts to hold it to a higher level of scrutiny. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, The Hague.
Now, the King is said to be doing well after being admitted to hospital for prostate treatment. He entered the London clinic this morning with the Queen. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
It was a low-key departure as the King, with the Queen at his side, left home for hospital. He's now an inpatient at the London clinic, here for a procedure to treat his prostate condition. In a statement, a palace spokesperson confirming the King was this morning admitted to a London hospital for scheduled treatment. His Majesty would like to thank all those who've sent their good wishes over the past week and is delighted to learn that his diagnosis is having a positive impact on public health awareness. And that's clear from clicks on prostate websites, rapidly rising since the King shared his news.
We've seen about a 60% uptick in people coming through on our inquiry lines. The interesting thing is that the men are coming through are being more open in the way they converse with us. They, instead of being a little bit reserved, as has been seen in the past, I think the King's lead has led people to want to talk about the subject.
And outside the palace, no king, but plenty of support.
I think it's nice, and if it helps people in the public to relate to the King better, it's a good thing.
So I think it's great that he's so open about it. If it leads other people to go and get checked, then that can only be a good thing.
He's cancelled engagements, but released a photo taken this week for Holocaust Memorial Day. No word, though, on when he'll return to work.
The fact that the King has not appointed councillors of state suggests that he'll be away from his duties only for a short period, and that when he sort of comes back, he'll probably focus on sort of the desk job, which is going through those red boxes.
A few hours after the King's admission, the Queen left hospital.
We now have this extraordinary situation with both the King and Kate being treated in the same hospital at the same time. The King even visiting his daughter-in-law just before his surgery.
Kate is still recovering after her abdominal surgery. This, we're told, will take 2 to 3 months. As for the King, he's said to be doing well. But for now, both senior royals out of action. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Central London.
Now, a father who's accused of the manslaughter of his newborn baby by gross negligence has defended how his daughter was treated.
Nearest rest stop. The nearest rest stop. Yeah, rest stop.
Well, a jury today was shown video of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon's car after it caught fire on a motorway as they travelled with their daughter in January of last year. They're both facing charges including child cruelty and causing or allowing the death of a baby girl. New documents have shown that the Post Office decided to sack forensic accountants who'd found bugs in their IT system. They also reveal the government has knowledge of the decision taken by the Post Office Board subcommittee codenamed Project Sparrow. The former sub-postmistress, Jo Hamilton, branded the decision disgusting. The Culture Secretary has launched a second investigation into the potential takeover of the Telegraph newspaper. The new Ofcom and Competition Markets Authority investigation will push back the deadline for a deal by weeks. Lucy Fraser has pointed to public concern about the takeover by an Abu Dhabi-backed entity. Now, new Brexit border controls come into force next week, which will leave British businesses facing increased costs. The rules are meant to protect biosecurity and diversity and will impact flowers, cheese and dairy products, as well as meat and fish. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has more.
Winter blooms under the lights in a vast greenhouse near Amsterdam. This is the heart of the European flower trade, a market worth €9 billion a year to the Netherlands, almost £1 billion of which comes from the UK. But for wholesalers like Heemskerk, the introduction of long-delayed Brexit checks at the UK border mean it's about to get more difficult and more expensive to do business.
So it is 100% checked, then it's coming to us. We check it now again.
And now someone
comes
to check it for the UK.
And then it goes in the truck, we have to check it again, and then in the UK, we check it again. But it's making an awful lot of costs. And somebody has to pay the bill at the end of the day. So I'm 100% sure that the last customer, the British consumer, has to pay for this.
From January the 31st, animal and plant products from the EU considered at medium risk of carrying pests or disease, including some flowers, milk, cheese and chilled or frozen meat and fish, will need a health certificate. From April the 30th, physical checks will be required on the same goods at the UK border. Among the species now considered a risk to Britain's biosecurity, these orchids, planted before the Brexit vote and painstakingly raised to peak next month. These orchids are ready to be harvested for Valentine's Day, but by the time they get to the UK, for the first time in decades, they will face border controls. First paperwork, in due course, physical inspection. Now, these measures have already been delayed 5 times, but now they're here. They're a whole new level of bureaucracy and cost. Hours after they're cut, the Dutch flowers are in New Covent Garden Market in London, where reliable, fast supply is crucial. Wholesalers like Freddie think the new checks will add 20% to the price of his daily deliveries, but customs delays could be ruinous.
We have orders coming in and going out in the early hours of the mornings, very fast turnaround, reloading vehicles, redistributing orders. If we experience a 4-hour delay, that's going to dramatically change our business model. It only takes a small mistake for it to have a potentially catastrophic effect, particularly in the lead up to Valentine's.
This is what you'll not have anymore.
The British food industry thinks the changes stink too. La Fromagerie has been importing cheese from across Europe for more than 40 years. Now a vet certificate will be required for every shipment from every supplier, which means some may stop altogether.
We deal with, 1 or 2 guys in a dairy with 50 sheep. Do they want to be paying for this new certificate to send to us? I assure you that most of them will say no.
Government says the rules are crucial to preserve British biosecurity, but with common fruit and vegetables likely to be added to the checklist, they're an unpalatable price of Brexit for many. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Now, there was an entirely unexpected but huge bit of news out of Anfield today. Jurgen Klopp announced that he was going to leave Liverpool at the end of the season. The 56-year-old says he needs to step away from the game for a bit. Now, in the 9 years that he was in charge, he transformed the club into one of the best sides in the world. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
When you've won it all, when can you give all this up? When, for Jurgen Klopp, you're just exhausted. This 9th season at Liverpool will be his last.
It is that I'm... how can I say that? I'm running out of energy. I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again and again.
The exit plan was revealed to the owners in November, but kept secret until Friday morning's sudden announcement by the 56-year-old.
Gutted, to be honest. Still taking it all in, but didn't see it coming at all.
I couldn't stop crying. It was hard to not cry.
Maybe it's time to change.
Klopp arrived from Germany in 2015 with energy and eccentricity, transforming the Reds with heavy metal football. Taking them back to the summit of Europe in 2019, before bringing the elusive prize to Anfield in 2020. Premier League glory at last, a team built around Salah, Van Dijk and Alisson, ending Liverpool's agonising 30-year title drought. There's complete shock here at Anfield as they imagine life without Jurgen Klopp next season. He's formed such a close bond with the fans, but more importantly, he's turned Liverpool into a dominant force once again.
When you think about legendary managers of the past, it's that part after them that's always the hardest to do. What kind of state did they leave the team in? And I think Jurgen was always really keen to make sure the team could be successful without him once he's gone. And it looks like that's the case.
Jurgen Klopp will leave as few managers do, on his own terms. And he could still leave with another 4 trophies, making following this iconic manager even harder. Rob Harris, Sky News, Anfield.
Right, this is Friday night on Sky News. Coming up, we're going to discuss why it's been a good week and a bad week for some, with the help of the historian and broadcaster Dan Snow and the artist and radio presenter Katie Puckrik. Yeah, you too. And we'll start with why it's been a great week for the future of the NHS, possibly, after 2 former Prime Ministers said artificial intelligence could save the health service.
They locked me up for 3.5 years and were prepared to throw away the key. And within a couple of seconds, there were a number of armed security.
An autism patient's dramatic escape from a secure psychiatric care unit sparks a major investigation.
I was petrified.
Follow Patient 11 wherever you get your podcasts.
And now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Welcome back to Friday Night with Kamali Melbourne. Continuing our review of the week's news, and at this point we've asked who's had a good week and who's had a bad one. Now the weekend is here, so we're all relieved it's over, but who finished as a winner? Now still with me, historian and broadcaster Dan Snow, and broadcaster and writer Katie Puckrik. Thanks for being with us. All right, let's start with you, Katie, and it's you think it's been a good week for AI?
Good week for AI, for our future robot overlords. A little bit of advice for both of you. Make friends with a robot.
Yes.
Because you want them to put in a good word when
Not just Siri, someone like a proper robot.
Well, yeah, you start with Siri, work your way up to Alexis, and then move on. So we have kind of our buddy comedy here. We've got Blair and Haig, and they're proposing that we scrape the NHS personal medical data and use that to beef up the AI system so that we can be diagnosed by our future robot doctors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I mean, it could work well. We've all willingly submitted our data, but I don't know if we've willingly consented to putting it out. They're saying, anonymously,
yes,
but putting it out into the world to train up our future robot doctors.
They do say, you're right, anonymise is the important point here. And they're saying that this could help train up doctors, it could help with extra kind of treatments as well. And it's, of course, they say, will be cost effective.
Be cost effective. And the idea, I guess, on the one hand, pretty good. If you're going to be making some money out of this initiative, it can be kind of plunged right back into the NHS. But
I suppose there's a couple of problems with this.
Yeah.
One, I guess some people might have a problem with William Hague and Tony Blair being the ones who had the big idea. And the other problem as well, I guess, they say it's anonymised, but of course, once you give your data away, then it's out there and people will be concerned about that.
Yeah, the government doesn't have a great record with massive IT projects, does it? I think there's a funny thing about men of a certain age and AI. And I count myself, I think maybe we're a little bit embarrassed we didn't realise the internet was a thing when it happened. And we laughed at what they're going to do? There's email. And the kids are all talking to each other on this social. And now it means that every man seeking relevance is AI is going to solve everything. It's going to fix it. I don't want to miss this wave, and it's kind of, there's an energy there.
What's going to fix Brexit? Computers. It's going to be the whole thing.
Fake Brexit, buddy.
All right. Now, Dan, good week potentially for Ghana and for some treasures that have gone back.
Interesting. So obviously, we, the British, took the equivalent of some crown jewels from what is now Ghana in the 19th century, and they have been returned on loan because returning them permanently would require an act of Parliament. And so these have been returned to the, it's no longer a ruling dynasty, but a member of that royal family. and they'll be on display in the museum. Then I think it's really interesting because we are discussing all of these kind of objects.
Yep.
Whether taken, purchased, looted, stolen. But there's a whole range of ways in which they arrived at this country, and now they're in a whole range of museums. And it's one of the great questions of our time. And my guess is that just like this, you just got to do it sensibly on a case-by-case basis and have adult discussions about it. And look, it's pretty important. I think these are the equivalent of the crown jewels of Ghana. I've never met anyone in Britain who's even heard of them. So therefore, in this example, it seems like a really good, reasonable thing that they should be returned because it's not like, people are really going to miss it here. Like, it's not that's even the main reason, but that's a pretty powerful.
We'll come on to the thing that you're thinking about then, but this is like the first of the African jewels that have gone back. The Benin bronzes, of course, went back as well, I think, from the Fortman Museum in South London. I think the argument as well for some of these things going back is that many of these jewels, especially for some kingdoms in Africa, aren't even on display. They're in storage in the museum. It's not even like you're seeing them all the time.
Right. I mean, is there a concern that they're not going to get some sort of like great British technological treatment once they go back? Like in terms of they're not going to be properly air conditioned or
I think there is actually some of that. Yeah, there is some of that argument that there are museums in Africa aren't up to the standard. But I know that there is a new museum, I think, in Senegal that has a lot of the high-end kind of storage units that can look after these.
And the Elgin marbles, are they still kind of hovering around in the...
You brought us on to our final topics. I know Dan's got things to say. I mean, look, that's the big one, isn't it? The Elgin marbles, or the Parthenon marbles.
The Parthenon marbles. And I think that there's controversy about how they arrived in the country, but they are here. And it's a really interesting question. Like, well, what's important? Where should they be? Should they be returned to be with the building from which they were removed in the 19th century? And I think, and my guess is, this is a really easy one for politicians to like jump up and down all over because it's like a heady kind of whiff of nationalism to it, and our stuff and their stuff and stealing and history and grievance. Actually, you just need to be sensible and work this stuff out case by case, but like Benin bronzes, like these artefacts, like the Elgin ones, just sit down and chat it out.
And they were having a little beef about it, COP, didn't they? With King Charles wearing the Greek colours on his tie. Right. It got kind of ludicrous.
It's a free hit for politicians, right? It just lands well with a certain audience. But we can do this. We've got to find a way to reunite many of these objects with. Sometimes don't send them back, sometimes do, but each one will have a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, shouldn't be a blanket rule. OK, it's been a good week, we think, for the northern white rhino because there's been a successful embryo transfer of white rhinos. Did you see this IVF on the northern white rhino, which was going extinct?
That is kind of interesting because those I think there's 2 white rhinos left.
2 female, yeah.
They're both female. They're a little long in the tooth. Long in the horn. And imagine, I mean, they didn't ask to be fertilized.
I don't think you can actually fertilise these.
It was a surrogate. There was a surrogate.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, surprise, there'll be a new family member. They'll wonder how it got there.
Rhinos are incredibly grumpy. Do you know that?
Are they?
Yeah.
Is that why they were
really?
They're not like lap pets.
No, I mean, I know I'm pro-rhino.
Just careful what you're about to say here, Dan.
But they are not very nice.
Are they not? Well, no. Well, no
wonder. Cheer up a bit.
No wonder
mantelpiece
they're
full
going...
of rhino horn, Dan.
No, exactly.
And that's why they were made extinct, because they were hunted to extinction for the horn.
I cannot understand, in a world where medically proven products exist to deal with male impotence. Why is the market in rhino horn not... Why is the price not falling out of rhino horn?
It says more about...
realise that that's the reason why they hunted those horns to extinction, because it's meant to be...
I mean, it says more about the men, the desperation, than it says about medical science.
But you can get pills for that now without having to... Like, rhino horn's really expensive.
Well,
and they've none
go
of them
for
left.
the best, if you're hard up or not.
You get it from your local pharmacy if you need to. Not horn, of course, but maybe that's the point. Anyway, Katie, it's been, sticking with the sort of the fertility thing, it's been a bad week for French women.
Bad week for French women. So the big idea is that President Macron has an idea that there's not enough babies being born in France. There's been a slackening of the birth rate, and just in a kind of passive-aggressive way, the idea is, hey, ladies, when you're 25, you can get a little test to find out if you're fertile.
Wow.
By the way, French women are going, I don't need a test for that. I can decide whether I want to look into the possibility of maybe birthing a baby in my own sweet time. And I don't need you just nudging me towards this idea that I need to get my fertility checked out. Now, of course, the test is offered to both men and women, but the burden of bearing children does primarily fall on women.
Say that again.
Yep.
And the other idea is that women are saying, okay, Mr. President, if you are so gosh darn interested in making it a nice environment for women to have children, why don't you make it a nice environment for women, period? Climate change is an issue. Giving nursery support for young children is an issue. There's all sorts of ways that you can make it a better environment.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because, of course, it's like the status thing is interesting in and of itself, but there is a birth rate issue that many nations are concerned about, right?
Yeah, there is, apparently. I find it very exhausting. I remember during the COVID, everyone's like, deflation. I'm like, OK, sorry, we're terrified about deflation. Then 2 months later, it was like, inflation is back. I'm like, this is exhausting. Are we now... So we are told that there's too many humans on this planet.
There are too many humans on this planet.
Well, there are too many.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, but suddenly economists are saying, by the way, it's very important to have more babies. And I'm like, I'm getting exhausted.
Well, Dan, this is the thing that is truly making me want to take a nap, because if there are too many people on the planet, you look at it closely and you're going, oh, are French people saying there needs to be more French people?
Right.
And, it's really more about our kind of people wanting more of our kind of people, and that's where it gets a little.
Unfortunately, there is a thread of that in Europe at this very moment.
There's plenty of healthy young people that could come and do all those jobs,
yes,
but they happen to have different skin colour to Emmanuel.
We're going to move on to the Royal Mail, and it's been a bad week, Dan, I think, for the letter.
Well, it's been the Royal Mail. I mean, the poor old letter. I mean, you try and send the old letter, right, for old time's sake. I try and get my kids...
Christmas cards.
I send the Christmas cards. My kids sent... I mean, it's like flogging them to send a thank you letter to their grandma, right, their nan. And so you're trying to do your bit, but the letter has been assailed since the invention of that pesky internet, right? And just when it couldn't get any worse, you got the multiple scandals engulfing the post office, and now you're going to get rid of Saturday delivery, which I had to say I didn't know was a thing.
Well, I have to say I don't know why this is a big deal. I mean, it's certainly supply and demand. You can't just say, well, it's because it's a good old British tradition that we're going to keep doing it. I mean...
They had all these hacks on various TV shows this week going, well, everyone reads my publication on a Saturday morning and a cup of tea. I'm like, what world are we living in?
If I'm case for the defence of Royal Mail and for the 6-day delivery, is that because for some people it's their only contact they actually have with a person? The postman coming sometimes.
They need to make some more friends, but okay. If the postman is their only friend.
It is
Katie's now going to make friends with everyone.
It's astonishing how good letters are, because occasionally I'm trying to get in touch with a World War II veteran who's 100 years old, no internet. So I go, OK, we're going to have to do this by letter, everyone, buckle up. Yeah. And, of course, you write a letter, it gets there the next day, it's so good. And then they write one back immediately. It's, like, much quicker than actually... I don't reply to emails for weeks at a time.
Well, here's the thing. I will say, as an American, I am astonished at how great your British postal system is.
Yes,
and it is, just as Dan says, it
is astonishing, but
instant gratification.
I'm not sure that's sustainable. That's the problem with it, right?
I get home after like a few weeks away and I got these letters and I throw nearly all of them away. I'm not sure.
Not just the bills. I don't get any letters.
I don't really get... No, I mean, I get like junk things. I don't get things that I need. Anyway.
All right. And our final topic to discuss with Good Week, Bad Week is about a young man called Brooklyn Beckham who had a pop-up restaurant and it came in for a bit of a pasting. Did you guys see this?
I did see this. So I'm all for entrepreneurial young people.
Yes.
That we're in an era of... I mean, people do sneer at influencers, but I see them as being very capable and entrepreneurial. However, Brooklyn Beckham doesn't even... he doesn't seem to cook.
I don't think he cooks.
Is he the photographer?
Well, I thought he was a footballer.
He's more of a socialite. He's more of a socialite.
Okay.
And he did have, I guess, a YouTube channel or some sort of online cooking show channel a couple of years ago, but it transpired that each episode took £100,000 to make, and 64 professionals.
Wow.
So it was bogus, which is fine. Run your little side hustle. It turns out it's a scam. But yeah, so this whole deal is that he created this pop-up restaurant in East London, Hackney, and you had
obviously,
and it was like Uber delivery, Uber Eats, and what was on the menu were like 4 or 5 comfort foods. So chicken tikka
Spaghetti
masala.
bolognese, I think.
Spaghetti bolognese.
I think full English was on there, right?
Full English sandwich.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's
Convenient.
in a sandwich, so
Ooh.
handy, portable. And then some dumplings thing, and not very good. And anyway, he's in America. Like, the chef should be on location, right?
He wasn't even
there cooking. He had other people doing it for him.
No.
He's just had a lot of pressure. He's David Beckham's son. He's got a lot to live up to, right?
It's awful.
It's hard, isn't it?
He needs to try harder.
Coming from successful families and very difficult.
No, but I mean, you got to accept the fact. Statistically, you're very unlikely to do anything as cool as your dad if you're David Beckham's son. I don't know what you want.
And Victoria Beckham, don't sleep
Sorry.
on posh.
Of course, true.
I mean, she was a Spice Girl, and
don't sleep on posh.
She's a huge fashion
and also
mogul right now.
she's a designer. She oversees a design firm and
I'm being told I've got to stop.
company.
Okay. I've enjoyed it too much. I've got to stop you. Dan, Katie, thank you very much for now. You're watching Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne, and as the head of the British Army has warned of the growing threat from Russia, we'll be discussing some of the beliefs behind Putin's decision-making. Welcome back. Now, this week, the head of the British Army said that the public must be prepared to take up arms if there's ever a war with Russia. Downing Street was quick to dismiss the warning by General Sir Patrick Saunders, but it was a sobering statement for the country's top general to make. In Ukraine, leaders are mulling widening the draft of men told to fight in the war against Russia. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, has been meeting some of the Ukrainians joining up.
Fire in the hole!
Final training for the front line. One of these men was a gas worker less than 3 months ago. Now, he's about to fight Russia.
Міняй плечі.
Що відчуваю?
How do I feel? How should I feel? Everything is okay. I feel like the guys need some help. That's why I'm here.
As Britain's army chief says the UK public needs to be ready for any future war, Ukraine offers an idea of what that means. It's unclear who among these men chose to sign up and who were caught in a growing conscription drive. But they seem willing to go forward, though their trainer says it's not just extra manpower that's required as the war drags on.
We need more weapons, ammunition, artillery, more rifles, machine guns.
As he spoke, a reminder, the real front line is only a few miles away. We head towards an artillery position nearby. Troops here are tasked with trying to stop their enemy advancing from the captured city of Bakhmut. In the past hour, we've heard a number of Ukrainian positions firing towards the Russians. You can hear one rocket there. The gun that we're with is still waiting for the order to fire, but every soldier I've spoken to has given one message: they need more ammunition. Just 3 shells were launched overnight from this Soviet-era howitzer. It's operated by a civilian who was mobilised last year, though he does have prior military experience. And why are you fighting?
If not us, who? We have to. We have to.
Another defining feature of the fight. One-way suicide drones.
Now it's the most dangerous sound.
They're often flown by civilians who volunteered to serve. Ruben was previously a soldier, but signed back up when Russia invaded. He shows us how the drone works and gives his reason for fighting.
Because this is my country, and in this country live my parents, live my friends.
It's why for Ukraine, national service matters, because when war erupts, everyone's impacted. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Eastern Ukraine.
Right now, before we bring in our next guest, I just want to bring you some breaking news that's come to us across the wires, and it concerns the ongoing situation in the Red Sea. The company Trafigura has said that one of their oil tankers has been hit by a missile in the Red Sea, a missile fired, we presume, by the Houthis. They've issued a short statement. It says, early on the 26th of January, the Marlin Luanda, a petroleum products tanker operated by Trafigura, was struck by a missile as it transited the Red Sea. Firefighting equipment on board is being deployed to suppress and control the fire, causing one cargo tank on the starboard side. The safety of the crew is their foremost priority. We remain in contact with the vessel and are monitoring the situation carefully. Military ships in the region are underway to provide assistance, and there has been a statement from the Houthis who have responded to this. This happened a short while ago, a couple of hours ago in the Red Sea. We're just getting the details now. The Houthis have said that they fired that missile at this tanker because of showing solidarity with the Palestinian people. The official spokesperson for the Houthis, Brigadier General Yahya Sadi, said, in vindication of the oppressed Palestinian people and in support and in solidarity with our brothers in the Gaza Strip, and within the response to the American-British aggression against our country, Yemeni naval forces carried out a targeted operation on the British oil ship. The ship I just mentioned, operated by Trafigura. So the situation in the Red Sea continues to worsen. Despite those airstrikes carried out by the UK and US, the Houthis continue to target merchant shipping. We'll get some more detail on that story throughout the evening. But let's bring in our next guest, the author and journalist Martin Sixsmith, who's written a new book about President Putin. Martin, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us. You'll have just seen Deborah's piece there about the situation on the front line in the war in Ukraine. And it got me to thinking about a conversation that you had with Hugo Rifkind earlier in the week, where you talked about sort of the way that we have thought about Russia all this time. And you mentioned Russia's fear of sort of encroachment all the way back to the Napoleonic era. And I wonder, have we just misunderstood the Russian psyche and the way that Russia has kind of operated for, well, forever?
I think we've not really made the effort to understand how Putin is thinking, what motivates him, what his aims are, and what he believes. We've simply dismissed him as a madman, that there's no logic behind what he's doing. But he does have his own logic. We may not agree with it, but he certainly has it. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by taking that attitude, because the Duke of Wellington very famously said that the whole art of war depends on guessing what's on the other side of the hill. In other words, trying to understand what your enemy is up to. And we haven't done that. And I don't think we're serving our own interests particularly well by taking that approach.
And why hasn't the West, if we can use that word, done that properly? Is it because we were so desperate for Russia to kind of come into the fold after the fall of the Soviet Union, or other reasons as to why we've decided not to treat Russia and to treat Putin now with the respect that he deserved?
Well, I think respect is an important thing. And, as you mentioned, the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, it kind of was an opportunity because for the next 9 years, the government of Boris Yeltsin, corrupt and inefficient though it was offering the friend of handship to the West. Yeltsin said that Russia wanted to have a cooperation agreement with the European Union. They even wanted to join NATO. But the West had already adopted this sort of very arrogant triumphalist attitude towards Russia that, as George Bush Sr. put it, we have won the Cold War. And for the next 9 years, the West really told Russia what it had to do. It was sort of lecturing the government of Boris Yeltsin about how Russia should forget all its history and start behaving like a Western-style capitalist state. And Bill Clinton, in the State Department, their shorthand for this was making the Russians eat their spinach. And he went to Moscow with his Deputy Secretary of State, Stowe Talbot, and Clinton even sort of thought, maybe we're being a bit too sort of lecturing towards Boris. He said to Stowe Talbot, he said, we keep saying to Boris Yeltsin, here's what you've got to do, Boris, here's some more shit for your face. And, it's not surprising that the Russians didn't really like that. And the person who really did imbibe and internalize that resentment was Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, and Martin, I mean, that's the leadership as well. I know you lived and worked in Russia for a period. Does that go through to the Russian people as well? Have they taken that on? I mean, let's not forget about the sort of propaganda machine that operates in Russia that has been able to coerce many people's beliefs. But that sense that you described there, does that go through to the population as well, do you think?
I think the Russian in the street does believe that Russia is vulnerable to threats from the West, that, you only have to look at Napoleon and Hitler to understand that it's not entirely unreasonable for ordinary Russians to think that. And of course, Putin's propaganda machine has reinforced that and reinforced it. But it does go back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, because up until 1989, Russia had this sort of buffer zone of the Warsaw Pact countries that it dominated in Eastern Europe. But then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that all disappeared. And, I'm old enough to remember I covered the Malta summit in December 1989 between George Bush Sr. and Mikhail Gorbachev. And George Bush wanted Russia to agree that it wouldn't impede the peaceful reunification of Germany. And Gorbachev gave that undertaking, but he said, in return, we want some assurances that NATO will not move into the vacuum of Eastern Europe. And 2 months later, I was in Moscow when the Secretary of State, James Baker, came and said twice, not 1 inch eastward, not 1 inch eastwards. And what's happened in the 30 years since then, NATO seems to have forgotten about that, because there are now NATO forces in the states adjoining Russia's border. And when NATO started talking about admitting Ukraine as a member, Putin called his generals together and he said, well, if that happens, there'll be NATO missiles, enemy missiles, as he called them, within 10 minutes striking range of Moscow. And, you and I remember 20 years ago in 2003 when the West, Washington and London, decided that the the illusory threat of Saddam Hussein's missiles striking Cyprus within 45 minutes was a reason to invade Iraq. So,
Martin,
the parallel is there.
Martin, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I guess Stan and Katie would like to ask you a question or two. And Katie...
Hi, Martin. I'm interested in the look at the psychology of the Russian people, because I lived in Moscow for a couple of years as a child. My dad was the air attaché, and we actually lived in the American embassy. And so that was in the height of the Cold War, and I had an opportunity to go back to Moscow in 2015. And what interested me so much was that I encountered people, older Russians, who regretted the fall of the Soviet Union. You know, they were promised this great entree into democracy and capitalism, but in fact what they wanted was communism. They wanted the Soviet socialist system. They felt more protected. They felt that they were being looked after more. And I think I was wondering if you think that this is something that the West doesn't understand, that people actually miss the Soviet Union.
Certainly, the older generation does. But what they wanted in 1991 was Western capitalism, because they lived under the sort of dreadful tutelage of communism for all those years, where people were, very poor and individual rights weren't respected. And they got to see in the perestroika period how well the West worked, the prosperity in the West and freedom and the openness of debate. And they wanted that. They wanted capitalism. But unfortunately, what they got in those 9 years of the Yeltsin government was economic disaster, runaway inflation. Their savings were wiped out, salaries and their pensions were not paid, and the country started to fall apart. And by 2000, as you say, the Russians had become nostalgic for the good old days before this capitalism came to Russia.
Martin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have run short of time, but I really do thank you for being with us, and I'll take time to read your book as well. Guys, thank you very much for being with us as well. We have run out of time, but I really enjoyed our conversation. And had a nice. It was too much fun. Had a nice Friday night. Let's do it again sometime. All right, we're going to take a short break. Coming up in the sport, we'll have more reaction to Jurgen Klopp's shock decision to leave Liverpool at the end of the season.
It's something, we've had them before in Northern Ireland, but they weren't kept, which is unfortunate. They were lost in the mists of time, 1750s, those sorts of dates. So to have one recovered properly, archaeologically, and then available for us to study. And as you say, the laboratory that I work with, 14 Chrono, did the dating and got this roughly 2,100 years. This is common for most bog bodies, peatland burials, because of the lack of oxygen down there and other chemical processes. So if you go to the Dublin Museum or Aarhus in Denmark, they're remarkable. You can see one of the fellows in Dublin has got a ginger beard, and you can see the fingerprints. And this one has elements of that, as well as being a bit decayed in others, as you can see on the photograph on your screen. So the police archaeologists were able to find fingernails, plenty of soft tissue, a kidney, which is really remarkable.
A kidney, that is quite incredible, because that is soft tissue, isn't it? That we're not talking about bone and teeth here.
Sarah Jane, I hope everyone's had their supper, because...
Sorry, I'm just checking the time, hopefully.
Yes. It is a bit weird, but it is nature.
And I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise.
Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Welcome back. Let me just remind you of that news that came across the wires a short while ago about another merchant vessel having been hit in the Red Sea by a Houthi missile. It's a ship that's operating on behalf of Trafigura, and it was transiting the Red Sea, was struck on the starboard side, one in the cargo tank. The safety of the crew, the company says, is the foremost priority, and military ships are in the region to provide assistance. They're monitoring the situation. A fire broke out as a result of the missile striking that ship as it's transiting through the Red Sea. We'll get more detail on the condition of that ship as soon as we get it here on Sky News. All right, let's get the latest sports now. And Teddy is here. And Teddy, I've had a couple of big shocks today. We talked about Jurgen last hour. Now in the tennis.
Yeah, what a morning it was. We had Jurgen at 10:30. I think Djokovic this morning breaking through, and it was a real surprise for the first time since 2018. Novak Djokovic losing a match at the Australian Open. Of course, he had the hiccup of the COVID vaccination situation, so he was sent home in 2022. But he's won the lot since then. He's won 10 Australian Opens overall. Of course, he's got 24. The men's record is level with Margaret Court, with Rafael Nadal going home pre-tournament. Andy Murray's injuries and form continues to struggle. A lot of people expected, even at the age of 36, that Djokovic would clean up once again at the Australian Open. But he's out to young Italian Yannick Sinner, and it wasn't really close. It was a rapid first set in particular against the 22-year-old. Just took 35 minutes. He took the second set against Djokovic 6-2. Djokovic battled back in the third, took it 7-6 in a tiebreak. And we thought maybe this is going to be one of those epic fitness tests that Djokovic, even against the younger guys, always seems to be outlast them. But no, it was a pretty comfortable fourth set. And Yannick Sinner through to his first Grand Slam final, where he'll play Daniel Medvedev, who's been to 2 Australian Open finals in the past, but lost to Djokovic on both accounts. But it's a real turn-up for the books, but it does provide a big opportunity for those young guys.
Right? That he'd never lost in a semi-final or something before this.
No,
I mean, amazing. But I think Yannick Sinner has beaten him twice, sort of back into last year, so he kind of knows his game.
Yannick Sinner's got a bit of a head-to-head record with him. He's currently 4th in the world. He's first Grand Slam final, but you just have a sense that maybe it's going to come to an end. But then you think Djokovic, yes, he's 36, he'll turn 37 in May, but he's famed for that fitness, he's famed for that tenacity. He's won 7 of the last 11 slams, despite his vaccination issues at the Australian Open and US Open as well in the past. You feel he will come back strong. Will Rafa Nadal be fit for French Open, where he's the king of clay? Or will Djokovic win it again like he did last year? Last year he won 3 of the 4, so we're sure he'll come back. He said it's his worst ever performance in the slam, but certainly don't write him off just yet.
We will not, Teddy.
And we've got a busy night of football as well to tell you about. FA Cup underway, 4 games.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Well, Stuart, it's been a few months now since the end of what was an incredible Ashes series. How are you adjusting now to life after playing cricket?
Yeah, really enjoying it. I think ultimately finishing on my own terms was really important for me, and I knew that I wanted to finish by my last ball playing for England. England versus Australia was a major pinnacle for me in Ashes cricket, and it was such a exciting and exhilarating series that I almost got to the stage where I don't know if it gets any better than this, really. So yeah, it was great to be able to sort of make the decision on my own, finish on my own terms, and I don't think it will really properly hit me until the Test team play again and Jimmy Anderson and Ben Stokes are walking out with an England cap on in their whites. I think that might sort of feel real, that I won't ever do that again. But no, at the moment I've got no regrets and feel really happy.
In the book you spoke about the fact that retirement only really came to you during the Old Trafford tests. So you came to a massive decision quite quickly.
Yeah, within 10 days, I think. So yeah, it was pretty stressful. Ultimately, anytime you walk away from something you love, it's really difficult. And I was loving playing cricket. I was loving working under Stokesy and Baz. It was great fun. I didn't feel much pressure. The communication was really good, and I was bowling really well and felt fit. So a lot of those things would say, carry on playing. And I honestly felt like I could do another couple of years, but I kept sort of bringing myself back to what's my next Everest, what's my next major challenge. I always need a challenge because I've got this goal to always continuously improve. I need something to charge towards and chase. And whenever I've written down in my whole career what's my next Everest, bang, within 30 seconds I've written down and I know what to target, and I just couldn't quite nail something down. So I think that ultimately told me that it was the right time to move and try something different.
Next Ashes 2 years away. Would that have felt too far when you were making that decision a few months ago?
No, I think I'd still be fit and fresh to play, but I know that a young family played a part as well. You know, Annabella's turning 1. The travel's a lot in international cricket, and the young years are so valuable. Ultimately, I'm 37. Next Ashes be 39, and although I still feel like I'd be able to play, I didn't want to sacrifice some sort of memories and special moments I could share with my family up until then, and because you have to dedicate your life to playing for England, you have to dedicate everything to it, and you know, I'd done that for 17 years, and you know, it's time to still feel very focused on a career, but spend a bit more time at home.
And you bowed out in magical circumstances. Last ball you hit for 6. Last ball you bowled was a wicket. 150 wickets in Ashes cricket. What was it about that series that always tended to get the best from you?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it's, I grew up on Ashes cricket. My dad played in the Ashes in 86, 87, won it over in Australia. So, you know, we talked about Ashes cricket in my household a lot, and I watched loads of it, and fortunately I watched a lot of Australia winning, which grew my, you know, competitive spirit to wanting to play a part in the Ashes and win the Ashes. So I think the team, the Australian culture I enjoy playing against, because it is highly competitive, it's aggressive, it's up front, and I enjoyed that style of cricket. And yeah, there was something about the pressure and the expectancy of Ashes cricket that I thrived on, I think. And
this Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thank you for that, Teddy. Let me bring you some more detail on that breaking news that I brought you before the Sport Bulletin. Alicia Cairns, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, has tweeted. Hello, it is 9 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of January. Welcome to Friday Night. It's the show where we take a look at some of the good and the bad bits of the news of the week and dissect them for your entertainment. Tonight, we'll be getting a culture fix as we review the latest releases and look at some of the front runners for the Oscars. But first, your headlines. Israel must do all it can to prevent genocide in Gaza, but the International Criminal Court has stopped short of ordering a ceasefire. Breaking news, an oil tanker in the Red Sea is on fire after being hit by a Houthi missile. The king is said to be doing well after receiving hospital treatment for an enlarged prostate. Sky News is on the front line with troops in Ukraine as plans to widen the draft of men forced to fight are considered. And leaving Liverpool at the top of the game, Jurgen Klopp surprises the world of football with a bombshell decision.
They have the say who gets the oil. Son, I got a question. You like women?
That's my weakness.
And in this week's What's to Watch, which of the Oscar favourites are actually worth it? Well, it's great to have your company. Stay a while with us. It's Friday night. Good evening. The International Court of Justice has demanded that Israel do all it can to prevent acts of genocide in its war against Hamas in Gaza. But it stopped short of ordering a ceasefire. Judges in The Hague are considering a case brought by South Africa which alleged that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. Israel had hoped the case would be thrown out, but the court has decided it will go ahead, although it could take years before there's a final ruling. Here's our International Affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
It was one of the most anticipated rulings in recent history. The South African accusers and the Israeli defence team waiting in suspense. In the UN's highest court, judges filed in to rule on the most heinous of charges, genocide. Israel, they say, does have a case to answer over its actions in Gaza.
In the court's view, the aforementioned facts and circumstances are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible.
There was no order for an immediate ceasefire as Israel had feared, but grave concern expressed for the humanitarian situation in Gaza and particular criticism for the statements of Israeli officials.
The court has taken note of a number of statements made by senior Israeli officials. Minister Gallant stated, speaking to Israeli troops on the Gaza border, I quote, "I have released all restraints. You saw what we are fighting against. We are fighting human animals."
Israel had urged the International Court of Justice to throw out this case. Instead, it will be fighting it for years to come. In this ruling, the judges don't take a position as to whether genocide is being committed by Israel in Gaza, but they are worried enough about the possibility to order Israel to do everything in its power to avoid doing so and to prevent and to punish genocidal incitement by senior Israeli officials. That in itself is a major blow to Israel, as is the fact that for years to come now, it is going to be investigated and tried for alleged genocide in the highest court in the United Nations. The Israelis insist their campaign in Gaza is justified after the atrocities of October the 7th, the worst single loss of Jewish life since the genocide of the Holocaust. On the eve of International Holocaust Day, their Prime Minister reacted with anger to the ruling.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous.
Israel says South Africa's brought this action for political reasons because of close ties with the Palestinians. So what did South Africa's foreign minister make of the actions of Hamas, who the judges say must immediately release all hostages?
But has Hamas behaved genocidally, would you say, even outside of this court?
I believe that what has been done by Hamas is certainly caused great harm. And I do think that the hostages should be freed, and that's what we must focus on.
Most immediately, the ruling focuses world attention sharply on the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, demanding Israel act urgently to ease an unfolding catastrophe. But it puts pressure on all UN members to act too. Palestinian officials at the court say that Britain must now step back from supporting Israel.
Britain should stop sending weapons to Israel.
should stop trying to cover up for the crimes that Israel is committing at the international level.
We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide!
The ruling doesn't bind Israel to any sweeping changes in the way it wages its war in Gaza. But its critics have prevailed now in efforts to hold it to a higher level of scrutiny. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, The Hague.
Let me bring you a little bit more on that breaking news that an oil tanker has been hit by a missile in the Red Sea. The Houthis have claimed responsibility for this latest attack on merchant shipping. Our correspondent Molly Malone is standing by. So, Molly, what more do we know?
We know that that ship, that oil tanker, has been hit in the Red Sea around 60 miles south of Aden. We understand that oil tanker to be operated by the multinational company Trafigura, which is one, of course, of the world's biggest suppliers of commodities. Now, they've said that firefighting equipment is on board and is being deployed to suppress the control of the fire. We have heard, though, already from the UK Maritime Trade Operations, who've released a statement. They've said they've received a report of an incident 60 nautical miles southeast of Aden in Yemen. CSO reports that a vessel has been struck and is currently on fire. They are requiring assistance. They go on to say authorities have been informed and are responding. Vessels are advised to transit with caution and report any suspicious activity. Now, the Houthi rebels, as you said, Kamali, have claimed responsibility for this attack. Those rebels have been causing serious problems for shipping and trade, of course, in the Red Sea since November. Now, I'm going to read you as well Alicia Cairns, who's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee here in the UK, responding to that news tonight, saying this is exactly the sort of environmental disaster some of us have been warning could happen. The Houthi terror attacks are a danger to lives and nature. And now it comes, of course, after a series of joint action by both the US and the UK, the latest action on Monday in response to the action that the Houthi rebels have been taking on various different shipping vessels in the Red Sea for a number of months now. But so far, it seems that they are undeterred.
Molly, for now, do appreciate that update, Molly Malone there, with the news that an oil tanker has been struck by a missile in the Red Sea. The Houthis have claimed responsibility for that attack, just the latest attack on merchant shipping in the region. More details throughout the evening here on Sky News. Now, the King is said to be doing well after being admitted to hospital for prostate treatment. He entered the clinic in London this morning with the Queen at his side. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
It was a low-key departure as the King, with the Queen at his side, left home for hospital. He's now an inpatient at the London clinic, here for a procedure to treat his prostate condition. In a statement, a palace spokesperson confirming the King was this morning admitted to a London hospital for scheduled treatment. His Majesty would like to thank all those who've sent their good wishes over the past week and is delighted to learn that his diagnosis is having a positive impact on public health awareness. And that's clear from clicks on prostate websites, rapidly rising since the King shared his news.
We've seen about a 60% uptick in people coming through on our inquiry lines. The interesting thing is that the men are coming through are being more open in the way they converse with us. They, instead of being a little bit reserved, as has been seen in the past, I think the King's lead has led people to want to talk about the subject.
And outside the palace, no King, but plenty of support.
I think it's nice, and if it helps people in the public to relate to the King better, it's a good thing.
So I think it's great that he's so open about it. If it leads other people to go and get checked, then that can only be a good thing.
He's cancelled engagements, but released a photo taken this week for Holocaust Memorial Day. No word, though, on when he'll return to work.
The fact that the King has not appointed councillors of state suggests that he'll be away from his duties only for a short period, and that when he sort of comes back, he'll probably focus on sort of the desk job, which is going through those red boxes.
A few hours after the King's admission, the Queen left hospital. We now have this extraordinary situation with both the King and Kate being treated in the same hospital at the same time. The King even visiting his daughter-in-law just before his surgery. Kate is still recovering after her abdominal surgery. This, we're told, will take 2 to 3 months. As for the King, he's said to be doing well. But for now, both senior royals out of action. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Central London.
Well, the King's health is sure to feature in tomorrow morning's newspapers. We're going to have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30, tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. But joining us will be the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Now, a father who's accused of the manslaughter of his newborn baby by gross negligence has defended how his daughter was treated.
Nearest rest stop. The nearest rest stop. Yeah, rest stop.
A jury today was shown video of a car driven by Constance Martin and Mark Gordon as they travelled with their daughter in January of last year. They were both facing charges including child cruelty and causing or allowing the death of the baby girl. New documents have revealed that the Post Office decided to sack forensic accountants who had found bugs in their IT system. They also revealed the government has knowledge of that decision taken by a Post Office subcommittee named Project Sparrow. Joe Hamilton, who's a former sub-postmaster, has branded the decision disgusting. The Culture Secretary has launched a second investigation into the possible takeover of the Telegraph. The new Ofcom and Competition and Markets Authority investigation will delay the deadline for weeks. Lucy Fraser pointed to some public concern about a takeover by the Abu Dhabi-backed organisation. Now, there was some entirely unexpected but huge news out of Anfield today. Jurgen Klopp announced he was going to leave Liverpool at the end of the season. The 56-year-old says he needs to step away for a bit. Now, in the 9 years he was in charge, he transformed the club into one of the best sides in the world. Here is our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
When you've won it all, when can you give all this up? When, for Jurgen Klopp, you're just exhausted. This 9th season at Liverpool will be his last.
It is that how can I say that I'm running out of energy. I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again and again.
The exit plan was revealed to the owners in November, but kept secret until Friday morning's sudden announcement by the 56-year-old.
Gutted, to be honest. Still taking it all in, but didn't see it coming at all.
I couldn't stop crying. Like, it was hard to not cry.
Maybe it's time to change.
Klopp arrived from Germany in 2015 with energy and eccentricity, transforming the Reds with heavy metal football. Taking them back to the summit of Europe in 2019, before bringing the elusive prize to Anfield in 2020. Premier League glory at last, a team built around Salah, Van Dijk and Alisson, ending Liverpool's agonising 30-year title drought. There's complete shock here at Anfield as they imagine life without Jurgen Klopp next season. He's formed such a close bond with the fans, but more importantly, he's turned Liverpool into a dominant force once again.
When you think about legendary managers of the past, it's that part after them that's always the hardest to do. What kind of state did they leave the team in? And I think Jurgen was always really keen to make sure the team could be successful without him once he's gone. And it looks like that's the case.
Jurgen Klopp will leave as few managers do, on his own terms. And he could still leave with another 4 trophies, making following this iconic manager even harder. Rob Harris, Sky News, Anfield.
This is Friday night on Sky News, and still to come, we're going to analyse the significance of today's ruling at the International Court of Justice and what it could mean for the war in Gaza.
They locked me up for 3.5 years and were prepared to throw away the key. And within a couple of seconds, there were a number of armed security.
An autism patient's dramatic escape from a secure psychiatric care unit
sparks a major investigation.
I was petrified.
Follow Patient 11 wherever you get your podcasts.
That has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides. And it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still.
We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news. Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places. I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Welcome back. You're watching Friday Night with me, Kamali Melbourne. Now, an international court has stopped short of ordering Israel to end its war in Gaza, but demanded it does everything in its power to prevent acts of genocide. The ruling by judges at the International Court of Justice comes as part of South Africa's case alleging Israel's military action against Hamas in Gaza is genocidal. Now, the court didn't order a ceasefire and is still considering its verdict on the most serious charge.
By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall ensure, with immediate effect, that its military does not commit any acts described in point 1 above.
Right, let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is at the ICJ in The Hague. Dom, it's good to have you with us. Just give us a sense of how it was when that ruling was being delivered by those judges in The Hague.
Well, it was a historic moment, and there was a real sense of suspense and anticipation ahead of that. The sort of difference in mood, apparently, or visibly at least, from the two delegations. There's a huge amount of press in the court before the judgment was given, the ruling was given. The South Africans seemed pretty relaxed. They were smiling with each other. I think they were enjoying the limelight. They sent their foreign minister here to observe and to react after the ruling, and then to their left was the Israeli delegation of lawyers, barristers, some of them British barristers, other legal advisors. They sat there looking quite nervous, looking very sombre, very serious, not really talking to each other. And then the doors opened, the court was told to rise, and then the judges walked in, the 15 permanent judges and the 2 ad hoc judges added to their number. And they walked in very slowly, I think that deliberately so, to underline, I think, the gravity of the moment, because genocide is really what they call the crime of all crimes. It's the most heinous charge that can be brought against individuals and against a country, the charge that that individual or country has tried to or is engaged in an effort to wipe out an entire people in whole or in part. And so it is a very grave allegation. And this was a momentous occasion because Israel is a country that was founded partly in the wake of, obviously, of the greatest genocide of all, the Holocaust, 6 million Jews wiped out by the Nazis in the war, in the Second World War. And it was set up partly to be a refuge for Jews, so they're never persecuted again, so they will be safe from genocides in the future. And Israelis believe that the attack on October the 7th, that they are now fighting a war to prevent ever being repeated, was a repeat, or certainly an attempted repeat of that genocide, of all genocides, where 1,200 Jews were wiped out by Hamas. And Hamas, they believe, is a genocidal organisation with a clear intent, explicit intent in its charter to wipe out the Jewish state and to kill all Jews. And so for them to be in a court charged with genocide is a moment of anger, but also I think for self-reflection. If you look at the commentary in the Israeli media since, there's a real sense of anger. I think about South Africa, that it brought this application that many Israelis believe was politically motivated, but also an anger, I think, with themselves, because in that ruling, the judges were pretty clear that the humanitarian situation in Gaza has caused them enormous cause for concern. If the Israeli military had fought this war in a way that hadn't caused that humanitarian disaster, if they had done more to avert that, then possibly this ruling would not have gone against them. But also that the bigger problem, I think, with the Israelis is the number of statements that Israeli officials have made that the South African case claim were genocidal in intent, and the judges read out a number of those and cited those as also cause of concern. If that kind of inflammatory rhetoric had not been made by Israeli officials, this ruling may not have happened as well. So I think there's a lot of anger, not just Israelis, among themselves about their own officials, and a lot of recrimination, I think, reflection and introspection about what they should do next in the light of this ruling.
What the Israelis may well do, and of course they've got to go back to the court, haven't they, in a month's time, and the court will be judging them on whether or not they've listened to those rulings that were made. But they also made the ruling that Hamas should release all hostages. Is there any chance of that happening, Dominic?
Yeah, certainly, as you say, the judges made it very clear that that the immediate and unconditional release of hostages is something that they want to happen. They're gravely concerned about the plight of the hostages. And I asked the South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor afterwards what she made of that, and did she think that Hamas was genocidal? Because the South Africans have been very much criticised for their associations with not just Palestinians, but with Hamas in particular, an organisation the Israelis believe is genocidal, that there are clear signs of very close ties between some members of the ANC, the ruling party of South Africa, and Hamas. And so I gave her a chance to answer those kind of allegations that they are close to Hamas, and what does she make of Hamas as an organisation? And does she believe that Hamas has been genocidal in the way it's taken these hostages and carried out this attack on October the 7th? And she's agreed with the court that the hostages should be released as well, but she stopped short of saying that she believed Hamas has been conducting itself in a genocidal way. Is it going to lead to the release of the hostages? I doubt that Hamas will listen to the International Court of Justice. It regards these hostages as vital pawns in its war with Israel. I think Hamas believes also that if it releases the hostages, then there's little to stop Israel going in even harder in Gaza. And a few hours after that ruling was given, Hamas released a video that was pretty cynical and cruel, showing 3 Israeli female hostages acting, it seemed, under some duress, saying that Israel should be doing more to help them. And the graphic in that video showed the faces of those 3 Israeli women sort of squeezed into an hourglass, and the caption on it was that time is running out. So a pretty explicit threat there about the fate of those hostages. So I think we can say that's a pretty cynical reaction to the ruling, and a sign that Hamas doesn't seem likely that it will be responding to this ruling in a way that's going to release those hostages anytime soon.
No, and while that ruling is in place, of course, the war goes on. What impact do you think it could have on the fighting on the ground, Dominic? I mean, as you've made it clear, it doesn't seem as if Hamas are going to release the hostages.
Well, I think we should make it clear that Genocide Convention was a set of laws that was invented and formulated in the wake of the Second World War, and the reasoning behind it was that there was a decision and a conclusion that humans had got so good at killing other humans on an industrial scale that a new set of laws, a whole new set of laws was required to deter that in future because of the Holocaust in particular. That set of laws was put in place, and the Israelis believe that a genocide was carried out, an attempted genocide was carried out against them on October the 7th, and they have reacted with anger to the outcome of this ruling. In terms of what it means for the war, I think it depends on what kind of pressure it puts on the Israelis. And what the judges have been saying is, and they said in this ruling, is that it's not the moment for them to decide whether a genocide is being committed in Gaza. And the South Africans wanted them to reach that conclusion, and they also wanted a ceasefire to be imposed in the war. And the judges stopped short of that. And I think that was disappointing for the South Africans. What they said was, and what they consoled themselves by, was their claim that the other orders of the court would require a ceasefire to be implemented, but that's not the same thing as the court actually imposing a ceasefire. But I think what the Israelis would say is that yes, they will have to comply with the orders of the court. They'll be relieved that the orders stop short of a full ceasefire. But what the judges didn't reach a conclusion about the fact or the claim that genocide is actually being conducted. What they said was that there's the possibility that there are the conditions for genocide to be conducted in Gaza, and what's required, they say, is a number of actions by the Israelis to prevent that possibility. That's pretty embarrassing and awkward for Israel, this country that was set up in the wake of the worst genocide in the history of mankind as a refuge, to now have to order its officials, its commanders, its soldiers to make sure that genocide doesn't happen in Gaza. And also they're going to have to prevent and punish these inciting statements, these genocidal statements of incitement that the court has now taken seriously. The South Africans claim that they were statements of genocidal incitement. So Israel has to act to do all that, and I think it is embarrassing for Israel that it's going to have to has to accept the findings of the court. In terms of what it means for the court, I think for Israel, I think it does put pressure on Israel, and it puts pressure on Israel's allies, Britain and America. It makes it harder for them to support Israel, which is now a country being tried and investigated in the UN's highest court for genocide. But it has to be said that the Israeli government has been under enormous amount of pressure, diplomatic pressure, increasing amount of pressure from European allies and America to restrict and restrain its activities in Gaza, and in response to that, it's actually just become more defiant, with most recently Benjamin Netanyahu's rejection completely again of any two-state solution plans to resolve the conflict. So as has happened in the past, the more pressure the Israelis come under, the more defiant they are. So you might say this ruling is going to lead to more pressure on Israel, but is that going to lead to a change in the war? Not necessarily. And what it has to be said at the moment is that this ruling is not binding in any sense in terms of forcing the Israelis to change the way they waged their war. I think possibly what it might lead to is greater pressure within Israel from within the Israeli media, more pressure on the Israeli government and more pressure to bring about an end to this war as quickly as possible, and to try and show some benefit, something to show for these over 3.5 months of bruising, bloody warfare that they've been waging in Gaza, and try and bring it to an end because of the ignominy, if you like, and the opprobrium that it is now bringing upon Israel, particularly in the light of this ruling.
OK. Dominic Waghorn there in The Hague. Thank you for that. OK, time now for a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Compared to recent storms, the weather's looking much more settled, although wet and windy weather will affect the northwest. For most, it's going to be a chilly evening under clear skies. It's going to be windier towards the north and west with blustery showers, and they may be wintry over the mountains of Scotland. Strong winds will feed in further showers to northwest Scotland overnight. Otherwise, much of the British Isles will be dry with clear spells. The wind's going to be lighter further south, allowing a frost and a few fog patches to form over parts of England.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Friday Night on Sky News. Coming up, what's to watch this week? We'll discuss the Oscar favourites and ask whether The Holdovers is a dark horse to watch out for at the Academy Awards. All right, let's take you to some breaking news coming from the United States. And the court in New York has reached a verdict in the defamation trial of Donald Trump. This is the E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuit involving the former president. The president has been found to have defamed Miss Carroll after he denied raping her, and the court will now very shortly decide exactly how much money Donald Trump will have to pay E. Jean Carroll for having been found guilty in this civil case of having defamed her. The court is due to announce its verdict in the next few minutes. Now, it's deciding how much Mr. Trump will have to pay in damages. Trump has been in court for the past couple of days. He actually gave evidence, a short evidence session on a Thursday night, and then later walked out of court before hearing the final arguments of the prosecution. Now, throughout this trial, Trump has continued to deny that he even knows Miss Carroll. This all relates back to a meeting between the two of them in a New York department store in the 1990s. A civil trial last year had found that the former president, Donald Trump, had assaulted Miss Carroll in that department store in the 1990s. The jury found him liable for defamation for calling her accusations a lie, and he was ordered to pay about $4 million in damages. The court in New York now is going to work out exactly how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for damages for this latest suit, for continuing to deny that he's ever known her. Our US correspondent Mark Stone is covering this for us. So Mark, I gave it a little bit of the background there. We're waiting for the announcement of the damages charge because Trump has already been found, it's a civil case, but already been found guilty of this.
Yes, the jury had until 4:30 today to come up with a verdict. Otherwise, they would be sent home and it would come back on Monday. And at the very last moment, they have reached a verdict. We don't have that yet. There are no cameras in court up in New York, but as I understand it, they are at this moment reading that verdict out. And for those people who are confused about the many, many court cases that Donald Trump is involved in, this is a defamation case which came as a consequence of a civil case up in New York last year, where Trump was found liable for the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll, the new magazine columnist. The civil court last year found that he was liable for sexually assaulting her in a New York department store in the 1990s. That prompted this case in which a jury was asked to award damages, to see if damages should be awarded to E. Jean Carroll for defamation. If so, how much? So the two key questions that the jury have been asked to answer and have now answered and are delivering a verdict on. First of all, is the question of whether or not she suffered more than just nominal damages. Yes or no. If the answer is yes, then they are asked to establish how much money she should be paid in damages. Now, E. Jean Carroll's legal team have asked for $25 million of damages to be paid to E. Jean Carroll by the former president. And that is the question now that the jury is being asked to answer. Donald Trump himself is not in court. He has been in court, but curiously left 25 minutes or so ago.
OK, we are expecting... Mark, we are expecting the verdict in a while, as you said, that's being read out in courts currently. And it's key, isn't it, at this point, Mark? As you mentioned, there are so many of these trials hanging over Donald Trump, that this is the civil suits that he's facing. But this all speaks to, I guess, to Donald Trump and the man that is leading in the Republican nomination, a man that was found last year, as you said, in the civil trial to have assaulted this woman in the 1990s and then to have lied about that. And now he's going to have to pay her damages for that. And yet, despite that, and despite those other 91 federal charges that he's facing, he's still immensely popular with some parts of the American public.
Not just some parts of the American public. I spent last week travelling across the Midwest, and it was absolutely key, demonstrated clearly to me that vast swathes of the American public believe that he is the man to be president again, notwithstanding the legal cases against him, whether they be cases about his attempts, it is alleged, to overthrow democracy
Mark,
here in the United States.
Sorry to interrupt you
or
there,
whether
but
it's a more personal thing.
The amount for damages has just come across the wires now, and Donald Trump must pay E. Jean Carroll $18.3 million in damages as a result of this defamation case. That's $18.3 million in damages, and you must also pay $65 million in punitive damages as a result of this case. As Mark was explaining, of course, Donald Trump was found in a civil suit to have assaulted E. Jean Carroll back in the 1990s. Donald Trump has continued to lie about that, defaming Miss Carroll, and that is why this case was brought. So the court has decided that Donald Trump, for the damages caused, will pay $18.3 million to E. Jean Carroll. But then, on top of that, because of the conduct and the lying, $65 million in punitive damages. Now, Mark, as I said, I've just read out the figures. There's $65 million in punitive damages, and that's because of the conduct, I guess, of Donald Trump throughout this case. You were just talking to us about sort of his popularity. And I guess the question now is what impact this will have, if any, on his supporters.
Well, look, first of all, I mean, that figure is utterly remarkable, and I think we will learn more about precisely what the jury has concluded in the moments ahead. Remember, as I say, that this is a courtroom. This is a trial that is taking place away from the cameras, and so we're learning in real time as they speak it, as they announce their verdict. We're getting it in real time from our colleagues inside the courtroom. 65, so a total there, $83.3 million, a staggering fee. Yes, look, I think Donald Trump's behaviour in court, he was and his lawyer were rebuked a number of times by the judge in court, which led some to believe that would affect the juries. The jury would see that behaviour, and that would impact their decision making as they made it, because he dismissed repeatedly. I mean, he continued in court, in open court, effectively to defame E. Jean Carroll, saying that he had no idea who she even was. He has previously called her a nut job on live television, a whack job, I should say, and I think all of this has played into the jury's minds as they came to their conclusion in this New York courthouse. But remember, Kamali, he's a very rich man to start with, and remember too that his audience was not the 12 jurors inside that courtroom. His audience is the wider American public, his base, and beyond that, people who he believes are increasingly, he would think, believing that he is the victim of a witch hunt. And so all of this will play neatly into that. A huge amount of money that he will now be forced to pay. I mean, a staggering amount of money. But against that, there will be donations that come flooding in from his supporters. $1 here, $1 there from supporters, many more from some. And that will add up, and he will use that to pay this legal fee, and he will hope that those on the right of politics here are buoyed by this, because they see him as I say, as the victim of a witch hunt. But at the heart of this case, remember, is a woman who claimed she was sexually assaulted by the former president in the 1990s, a woman who convinced a court last year that he was liable for that sexual assault. Liable, not guilty, because it was a civil trial, not a criminal trial. And this woman has, ever since then, she has argued, and a jury has agreed, has been damaged personally, professionally by this, by what happened, and by the comments that he has made since then. So a jury, as I say, has now concluded that the former president of the United States must pay this magazine write a figure of $83.3 million.
Yeah, Mark, as you say, an astounding figure, and that $83.3 million is made up of two amounts: $18.3 million in compensatory damages, and then that's $65 million as well in punitive damages for, as you describe, Trump's behaviour in there, as you say, found liable for that assault in the 1990s, and if continuing to defame the character of E. Jean Carroll throughout the course of this court action. And this isn't the only case that Donald Trump is facing in which he could be liable to end up paying huge amounts of money, is it, Mark? Because there is that other case that's going on in New York as well to do with his business dealings, where there's a huge amount of money at stake there, and also at stake there, the chance that Donald Trump and his sons and his business empire will not be able to do business in the state of New York.
Yeah, I mean, the prospect of them not being able to do business in New York, the prospect of them having real estate in New York taken from them, all of that is there. That is the other case up in New York. There is a case here in Washington, D.C., a federal case against Donald Trump for his alleged insurrection, his involvement in the January the 6th riots here on Capitol Hill. That is paused at the moment for a sideline and hugely consequential legal ruling on whether or not presidents are immune from prosecution or not. That will be decided by judges any time now. Could have happened this week. It won't now, but may well happen next week. That's the federal case here in Washington. In Atlanta, in Georgia, there is another federal case involving his attempts to overturn the last election there in that state. And then there is a fourth case down in Miami regarding his removal of classified documents from the White House and holding them at his Mar-a-Lago property. So many court cases surrounding the former president, but we have seen quite clearly that every time he appears in court, which is why he goes to these courtrooms, because for him, they are the campaign trail. Every time he appears in court, his numbers, his fundraising, all of that goes up. That is the topsy-turvy world of American politics at the moment.
It is indeed. All right, Mark Stone in DC, thank you for that. Just to reiterate that breaking news, Donald Trump must pay $83.3 million to the writer E. Jean Carroll for calling her sexual assault allegation a lie. All right, we're going to take a short break, but coming up in this week's What to Watch, we'll discuss the Oscar favourites and ask whether The Holdovers is a dark horse for the Academy Awards.
It's something we've had them before in Northern Ireland, but they weren't kept, which is unfortunate. They were lost in the mists of time, 1750s, those sorts of dates. So to have one recovered properly, archaeologically, and then available for us to study. And as you say, the laboratory that I work with, 14 Chrono, did the dating and got this roughly 2,100 years. This is common for most bog bodies, peatland burials, because of the lack of oxygen down there and other chemical processes. So if you go to the Dublin Museum or Aarhus in Denmark, they're remarkable. You can see one of the fellows in Dublin has got a ginger beard, and you can see the fingerprints. And this one has elements of that, as well as being a bit decayed in others, as you can see on the photograph on your screen. So the police archaeologists were able to find fingernails, plenty of soft tissue, a kidney, which is really remarkable.
A kidney, that is quite incredible, because that is soft tissue, isn't it? That we're not talking about bone and teeth here.
Sarah Jane, I hope everyone's had their supper, because...
Sorry, I'm just checking the time, hopefully.
Yes. It is a bit weird, but it is nature.
Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Welcome back. You're watching Friday Now. Now, the weekend is here, and with that in mind, we're going to ask which of the Oscar favourites we need to be watching. With me to do that is entertainment journalist Ellie Phillips. Ellie, lovely to have you with us. Let's get straight into it. Yes. So, which ones should we be watching?
Killers of the Flower Moon. It's a long film. It's
3 hours 26.
Yeah, it's only 4 hours long. It's based on the book by David Gran about the Osage murders, which took place in 1920s Oklahoma. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone. If you haven't seen it, here's a quick look at it.
Well, our war hero has arrived. You made a good choice coming back here. Osage are the finest, wealthiest, and most beautiful people on God's earth. They outsmarted everybody. They have the say who gets the oil. Son, I got a question. You like women?
That's my weakness.
Well, we mix these families together, and that estate money flows the right direction. It'll come to us.
Shomikasi. That's how you are.
All right. Now, Ellie, I am watching this, but I'm watching it in instalments because my little boy doesn't give me much time to watch it. 3 hours 26 is a long film, but it is worth it.
Worth
right?
it. It's up for 10 Oscars. Yeah. In fact, Lily is the first Native American to ever be nominated for an acting award for this, which is great. Leo is not nominated, but Robert De Niro is, and he is brilliant in it, so power through.
Now, we've talked a lot about Oppenheimer. I'd like to talk about the holdovers, if that's possible. Yes. The guys in my area are going to tell me we can't, but the holdovers are being released this weekend, right?
Yeah, this is a film you want to watch. It's really good for this time of year. It's feel-good, it's funny. It's set in 1970s America, and it's about a few boarding school kids who have to stay at boarding school over Christmas, and it's up for a lot of awards, so take a look at this one.
Yourself in detention, sir. Being here with you is already one big detention. Son of a bitch, that's another detention. Do you think I want to be babysitting you? No, I was praying your mother would pick up the phone, or your father would arrive in a helicopter or a flying saucer. My father's dead.
You don't tell a boy that's been left behind.
Or it looks kind of funny. Paul Giamatti, he's up for some awards,
He's
right?
up for Best Actor for this, and I think it's well-deserved. And actually, Davine Joy Randolph, who we see there in it, she plays the head cook. She's up for Best Supporting Actress, and she won the Golden Globe, so she's odds-on to take the Oscar for this. First nomination, it could be a first win, and very much deserved.
And it's funny as well.
It's funny, it's feel-good, yeah. They call it like a dramology or something. It's some new word they've come up with to describe it.
OK. Any tips for what you think will do really well at the Oscars?
Oppenheimer. It's going to sweep the board. It's up for 13 awards, which is only one shy of the record, which is 14, held by Titanic. So I think it will do really well. Cillian Murphy is odds-on to win Best Actor, and he is phenomenal in it. He is incredible. Others are up for it, but I don't necessarily know that they'll win their categories in terms of the acting. And I think Christopher Nolan might win Best Director, finally, for this
Probably
one.
deserves one, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's been a while. He's not won it yet. He's up there.
Ellie, lovely to have you with us. Thank you very much for that. All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, compared to our recent storms, our weather is looking much more settled, although wet and windy weather will affect the northwest. For most, it's a chilly evening under clear skies. However, it's going to be windier towards the north and west with blustery showers, and these may be wintry over the Scottish mountains. Strong winds will feed in further showers to northwest Scotland. Otherwise, much of the British Isles will be dry and clear.
The weather, Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, that's it from me on Friday night with Kamali Melbourne. Coming up next, it's Sky News 10 with Barbara and Sarah Welsh. Have the latest on Donald Trump being ordered to pay E. Jean Carroll more than $80 million. We'll see you next week.